I want to call your attention to the fact that if you wish to address the board during the period for public comment on a subject not on the agenda, you must complete a public presentation request card and submit it to the board president prior to the period for public comment. Only those who have submitted cards will be called upon to speak, and no cards will be accepted after the period has begun. Every person who wishes to address the board must fill out a card, and you will find the cards in the lobby. With that being said, I will turn this over to the superintendent's welcome and announcements this evening.
Thank you, President
Dr.
Walker.
Noguchi.
It's great to see everyone here this evening. It's always wonderful to see so many students out in the audience. I first want to thank the choir and the string quartet from Enox and Johansson High School for coming out tonight. I definitely am looking forward to hearing your performances in just a little bit. I also want to acknowledge the California League of High School Teacher Nominees and winner. You know, a school district is only as good as the teachers that teach in the school district, and you all are an example of where we would like all of our teachers to be. So thank you for all the work that you do, and I look forward to the recognition a little bit later on. And lastly, I would like to take just a minute and personally thank the board for this last week. We all went out to California, our School Boards Association conference. I think we learned a lot. There were a couple great presentations and workshops that help us work better together and also move our district forward. So I want to thank you for your time. It takes a lot to pack everything up, leave your families, and go down to San Diego. And it was raining there as well, so it was not sunny San Diego. But thank you for your commitment, and thank you for continuing to work on our teaming and working together as a team, because I think the stronger we are here and the stronger we work together, the better it's going to be for the folks out in the audience and ultimately our students. So thank you.
That brings us to A6, report of meetings attended by Board of Education members. There's surely at least 6 of us that went to a whole bunch of meetings in San Diego. So I see Trustee West light up first.
Many of the workshops were very informative. We learned a lot about some of the new things coming down the pike for education, some of the new laws that are coming next year in January of 2020. And so it's important that we stay on top of the current events of what's going on in education. I think my favorite part was the keynote speakers. We had 2 excellent keynote speakers. One of them talked about he did a documentary about his son who has autism, and the strides that young man made from not being able to talk to being a participant in his own education and showing him get out on his own was inspiring to me. So it was just a really great trip, and thank you that we were allowed to go to that.
Trustee Irvin, I'll stay to the left.
Yes, I also went to the microphone check. Yeah. Went to the California School Boards Association, and like my colleague, Dr. West, I learned a great deal by participating in many of the workshops, and saw some really good folks down there. Met some new folks that I met last year, and other folks that I knew from other school districts as well, and just kind of brainstorming together and trying to see how we can really come together and do great things for our children, for our teachers and our administrators in our schools, so we can elevate to the next level. Also participated in selection for the 10th Congressional District selection. We had several of our students who applied for the service academies. So the Naval Academy, best academy, Army, West Point, and the Air Force, Chair Force, and the Coast Guard. And so it was really to see the talent of our young people who are applying to serve our nation, do the Military Service Academy to become the future leaders of our military and our communities as well. So it was very competitive. We had a lot of students who, I've never seen so many 4.0s in one collective evaluation of students that I've ever seen applying for these service academies. So these are the premier students that want to continue their service at the next level with our nation. So it was very inspiring to be a part of that, selection committee, and to represent our congressional 10th district and those students who are aspiring to move on in their next chapter of their lives.
Trustee Brown. There you go.
Also, at CSBA, lots of inspiring sessions that we were able to attend, and I, of course, focused on facilities as much as I could, learned a few new things there, but also was inspired by some presentations that were given about how we can better serve our graduating seniors through their first year of college. And so I'll be trying to share some of those ideas with the district to see if there's something we could improve to help their success rate as they move from Modesto City Schools into their college future. Another event that I participated in Saturday evening was the Modesto Parade of Lights, and I know it has a different name than that, but that's in essence what it was. And I was able to at least touch base with 3 bands from our district, and there may have been more, but I am aware of 3. I got pictures of Downey and Johansson, and a friend of mine shared a picture of Mohai's marching band. So if there were other bands, I apologize I didn't get a chance to see them, but I'll share pictures and make sure that we share that on our Facebook and Instagram.
Trustee Marks.
So I also attended the CSBA conference, really learned a lot. I appreciated James Olamos, I got Edward James Olmos and his youth cinema project, which was about closing the achievement gap. And there's 13 school districts in California that are currently doing that, and they're using cinema to do it. So they're writing scripts, they're reviewing scripts, they're writing stories. It's just a fabulous program. So I was appreciative just to see that and see what they were doing and see if there's some ideas that we might incorporate in our district to, we have some wonderful cinema type ideas that we do already here with media. So just to see how we could expand those. But I also attended the budget advisory meeting last week or 2 weeks ago with our associate superintendent, Mr. Zerli, and then our superintendent, Dr. Noguchi. We had a chance to go around the room and write down ideas on how we could reduce costs, and then also how we might be able to increase our revenue so that we might be able to have be able to use money in different ways. So that was a really great way for us to think together and work in teams around the room and then talk about it afterwards. And our teachers union also participated, and it was great just to share all the ideas that came about in that. I also attended the SAPFA meeting, and that one we moved our regular meeting. We just made a plan to move our regular meeting to tomorrow night so that it could be a regular meeting, and we could have the public attend also at 6 o'clock. So we changed the time so that the public would have a better opportunity to attend. So that all went well. And I'm also a delegate for the California School Boards Association. So we have our annual meeting just prior to the conference. And in that, we voted 2 new leaders in, which usually we only vote 1 in, but this year we had a lot of stuff happen. And so we voted 2 new ones in, Suzanne Kitchens and Susan Heredia. And it'll be great to see how they do in the new positions that they were elected in. And then we also heard a lot of updates on the polls of what's happening with the bonds that are on the March ballot and then also on the November ballot, which will affect our schools, or could potentially affect our schools in positive ways. If they pass, it will extend the amount of money in the March ballot to the amount that we would be receiving for the amount of money that we as a district put in. Then if the taxpayers also choose to help us, then it will make our money double what it is right now. So that would be very beneficial to us. So we hope that that passes. I know the Chamber of Commerce is on board with it, the State Chamber of Commerce, and then some other business and building industries. So that's always helpful when they come on board with something that will help all of the people who live in our city. So that's it.
All right, thank you. I did also actually before I travel. Before we went to San Diego, I went to MJC, where there was a joint performance with the MJC band and the Enox band. And so they did about 30, 45 minutes, 4 or 5 songs apiece. And it's always good to see our bands playing, and then doing a combination concert is always fun because you've got members that used to be in the Enox band that are now in the MJC band. So also a chance for friends to get back together. San Diego Education Conference. I think the highlighted note, I'll go in reverse, I think was team building, the ability to sit and have conversations with fellow members of the board. I think I had more with Trustee Irvin than anybody because we kept bumping into each other, but that's a good thing because the Brown Act doesn't let me reach too far from this chair. We all attended the Cal SSD luncheon, most of us did. I think it was instructive to hear what folks felt that they were hearing from the legislature, their reluctance to tax much more. There was some interesting insights there. Just to listen, Trustee Brown asked a question I thought was relevant. It was interesting. I got back last night. I was reading an article. CSBA has now pulled an item off the ballot to not conflict with the Prop 13 thing. Doesn't resolve the other issue, but I think it just goes to the awareness that folks are feeling a bit overtaxed. And I think money management was certainly an issue of that discussion. Went and attended an alternative education high school session, something I have a great deal of interest with. It was reaffirming of some of the ideas I've talked with the superintendent about, and how we sort of take that from being something that is not always lifted up as high as it should be in different ways to just really raise that profile, which I thought was motivational because it was an actual example of a district that's really transformed that program. The other one I did was equity-based grading. We're going to leave that third rail alone because apparently the opening statement was be careful. I'm not necessarily scared of being careful, but we're going to approach that very cautiously. But it was a very interesting presentation. One on math, just because I wanted to see what they had to say. I will pick up with that later in the agenda item, but I think it was interesting. They built it as a success story, and they opened up the presentation with, we haven't really done as much as we'd like to, and we're not where we want to be, and we're not getting there as quick as we want to. A little bit of false advertising, but overall I think it was a good conference. It was a good time. I think the ability for all of us to get together and have conversations separate from this room, I think is always helpful because I think it builds teamwork, it builds trust, and I think it goes to inform how we approach the problems that are in front of us today. I am now going to turn this back over to recognitions, which I believe is Ms. Chris Nuna, and
Yes.
I believe another band performance, and I love me some music.
Yes, we have, in celebration of this season, I'm very pleased to have 2 fabulous performing arts troupes with us. They're both award-winning, I believe, as well. So what we are going to do is we're going to have Jennifer Perrier and her group from Johansson High School, the Fabulous Choir. They're going to perform 2 songs for us. And then you probably heard the Enoch String Quartet led by Phil Vallejo. They were performing in the interlude before the board meeting started, and then they'll close out with 1 or 2 songs, whatever they have time for. But what I would do is go ahead and invite the board and the cabinet to come down. We've reserved the front row so that you don't have to crank your necks because the string quartet will be set up right over there. So please enjoy the music. Cabinet too, yeah.
Let there be music.
Thank you so much to the Johansson High School Choir. Weren't they amazing? That was so great. I don't think I stopped smiling the whole time. So Phil Vallejo and his team from Enoch's High School, fabulous double string quartet, they will be performing a couple of songs as well. So enjoy. Thank you so much for the awesome performances. Those were just beautiful, and we appreciate you taking time out of your night to come and celebrate the season with us. So the board and cabinet, feel free to come back to your seats, and then we'll move on to the next recognition as well. I'd like to go ahead and invite Downey High School Principal Richard Baum up to the podium. He's going to be presenting on the California League of High Schools. Oh, right here on the corner, I'm sorry, where Becky Fortuna is. Sorry, Richard. But we had several teachers who were submitted to the California League of High Schools, Region 6, and Richard is the trustee for that particular region. So Richard will be doing the introductions, and then I'll invite Trustee Brown and Trustee West if you'd like to come down when it's time for a photo. That would be wonderful.
So just a quick introduction of the California League of Schools. They have been recognizing Teachers of the Year for the last 24 years, starting in 1995. They had 5 teachers at that point. Last November 19th, we had a dinner at Del Rio Country Club. We recognized 12 Educators of the Year from the San Joaquin Stanislaus County region, Region 6, and 8 of those honorees were from the Modesto City Schools. And I'd like to invite up the, yes. So I'd like to invite up Randy Smith from Bayer High School. Tim Garcia from Grace M. Davis High School. Elizabeth Jesberg from Downey High School. Mr. Jared Jarvis from Gerard Jarvis from Robert Elliott. Jessica Valerio from James Enochs High School. Christina Albaron from Peter Johansson High School. Shelley Coito from Modesto High School. And Matthew Soderlin from Grigori High School. So if I could say one more thing about Matt, at that dinner, each of the teachers had an opportunity to speak for 3 minutes to the crowd. They really enjoyed it, I know. Matt Soderlin was the the honoree that was recognized as the Educator of the Year for Region 6, and he will be going on to the State Educator of the Year dinner in Monterey, California, January 11th. So congratulations, Matt.
Closer.
And we'll take a minute here, let the room clear a bit before we proceed. All right, that brings us to item A8, approval of the annual board reorganization, where we change jobs and get jobs and somebody else takes this job and we move forward. That the first part of that is selection of the board president. Before I ask for motions and we go back to the bylaws, I just want to take a minute and reflect. It's been an extraordinary 2.5 years from when we started out looking at picking a new superintendent, my job sitting next to as a vice president, working with then President Newman, Trustee Newman, and then taking this position. And you look back over time, how much has been accomplished. And it's not a tribute to 7 people sitting here, although we're part of that equation. it's everybody on this team. It's the superintendent, it's cabinet, it's staff, it's Mr. Burton and Yasser in the back, it's our teachers, it's our staff. Nothing is successful unless we're all sort of working in the same direction. And I think we've had an extraordinary 2.5 years. I made a short list. I think at the top of it was teamwork, which is what I just highlighted. Nothing happens if we're not all leaning in the same direction. We reorganized management, staff, extended cabinet, moved people in different offices, gave people new jobs. All of that more or less came off without a hitch, minus a lot of boxes and a lot of painting. But relative to the massive size of that change, all things being equal, I've been part of big organizations. I don't recall one that smooth ever. We have a budget advisory committee out there, a technology advisory committee out there that are out looking at how we make better use of our resources to keep us into what the board decided was a non-deficit spending model while still allowing change and improvement and additions to help our students achieve greater success. We have a bond out there now. We have Trustee Brown and Trustee Lopez who have been leaning forward in that. We have a committee there. We're meeting regularly. There's a proposed plan about how we're going to go after fixing which sites and how we can leverage that the best. I think those are issues that all of us agreed on. All of us leaned forward. It wasn't one person's issue. We had smaller things that weren't small but were individually pushed. Trustee Irvin had this concept about ROTC we celebrated last month. We now have a JROTC program at a high school next year, and we are no longer the largest school district in the country without one. That's a huge lift. I think the issues that I've run across, and I think this job will teach you once you sit here, it's not necessarily about what I want to do as an agenda. It's how do we lean forward as 7. And so a lot of things I've done in the background. We now have a computer science program that is up and running and leaning forward at Enox High School in concert with UCLA and grant money. It wasn't something we voted on the board. It was a common communication that started 18 months ago with me and the superintendent. I have always been asking about math. We now have a K-8 pilot program. 4 of our junior high schools are now piloting a new math program. The same thing is going on at a handful of elementary schools. Later on tonight, we will be discussing how we take that first step toward a high school math program. And then what Miss Matt calls my baby. And I've told her it's not my baby, it's my adopted child because I didn't come here looking for it. But I ran into board policies. I didn't know they were that badly out of date. I just asked to see them. And they were a mess. And it took years to convince folks to move forward. But in the last 18 months, this board has passed more board policy updates, changes, and deletions any other board in 4 years cumulatively in the history of Modesto City Schools, going back to the oldest I could find, which was 1977. We have done over 150 board policies just in the last 12 months. I think when you look at this team, all the way around, I don't care where you go in this county, I think we have been the most productive, team-focused, goal-oriented group that I could have ever hoped to work with. I think we've achieved amazing things. There is more to do, but I think it's worth acknowledging that we don't get anything done together unless we work as a team. That's leadership from Trustee Newman mentoring me. It's leadership from recognizing that I wasn't particularly wanting to fight with board policies, but taking that lead. It was looking and saying there is something wrong with our math program when everybody told me I was wrong, and we will discuss that later tonight. Trustee Irvin leaning forward on ROTC. Trustee West talking about counseling. Trustee Brown on our buildings, our facilities, our leadership, all the way around. Outstanding job by everybody. I am glad to have had this opportunity. I learned from it, and I cannot wait to slide over a couple of seats and get back to what I think I really do best, which is analyzing, looking at data, doing research, and looking at bigger picture problems and saying, how do we skin this cat so that everybody can get across the finish line in one piece and still be friends? Thank you for the opportunity.
Right. Point of personal privilege, Chair.
You're
May I? Okay. So, usually it falls to the vice president to be able to say thank you to the president. And so we wanted to thank you. You did like the speech that was supposed to be for
Oh,
others
see,
to
I
be able to-
apologize.
Okay, so I will still say a few things, but I just really appreciate your time and effort that you put into this board and the amount of, I'll say really deep dive. We call it getting into the weeds sometimes, but it does give us another perspective, and I always appreciate that about you. And your, I think you did bring the dialogue of the math to the forefront, and that has been, I know, something you really cared about, and your passion comes through in everything that you do, John, everything that you do. So I just appreciate your leadership this year, all that you've accomplished, which you did the short list, which I know there's a lot more than that. Thank you for really supporting Dr. Noguchi and coming in as the new superintendent. All the things that had to be done with that, you and Ms. Newman all, had to work really hard as last year, and then also this year. So I've appreciated your leadership and how you brought us forward in many things and brought a lot of things to the table for us to talk about. So I appreciate that. Thank you for your year. Here's it actually comes off of here, an actual gavel. So thank you, John.
Thank you. Thank you. And I do appreciate it. I don't know if my daughters will appreciate if the gavel actually comes off of here and I start disrupting dinner if it gets out of control. Trustee, is your light on?
Yes, I was next.
Well, I just want to thank you, Trustee. Well, you're not out as president. So President Walker, for the last time we call you that. Thank you for your work on everything. We had the opportunity to work together for the whole year before you became president. And I appreciate basically he's been doing 2 years of work on this. And because as vice president, we worked as a team during that time of transition. And so thank you for your tireless work and your effort. And I just think we are a better board and a better district because of it. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and nothing happens without all of us together. Trustee Brown?
Well, John, I really appreciate the fact that you dedicated so much effort and so much time into the position of president. And I appreciate the fact that each of us has the ability to express our feelings, our passions, and our opinions. And even though we don't always agree, we can walk away friends after
agree.
having had a meaningful conversation and coming to a decision that we all can support. So appreciate your leadership allowing us to do that. Thank you.
Well, it goes both ways. I think that we are, as I said, I believe if you look around, I think we are the model governance team. When I look around, who has gotten things done together. It's not one individual up here. It's all 7, 8, 9, and all that supporting cast. So we get to give the job away. So we come up to A1, selection of the president for the board. We have new board bylaws. I don't think it changes a whole lot with this tonight. But I will entertain a motion for somebody if they have an individual who would like to roll the gavel, be the board president. I see Trustee West.
I would like to nominate Cindy Marks as position for board president for this next year.
All right, we have a motion. Do I have a second? Trustee Newman. So, all those in favor of Trustee Marks becoming our new board president, say aye. Hands in the air. Aye. Passes unanimously. See, I didn't want to make a motion for the president because I'm there, but if I'm allowed to, I will make a motion for the vice president. I think the conversation I had at the education conference this weekend indicated to me that Trustee West might be interested. And if she's willing, I would like to make the motion that you become our new vice president.
I would be honored to learn from Cindy Marks. I have much to learn, and I think she has a lot of experience. So I would be honored to take that position.
And I'll second it. Oh, go ahead.
Trustee Brown? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. And our trend of being 7 wide and being very good up here, that is the easiest that has gone in all my years sitting here. We're going to roll through these and then we'll switch chairs at the end here. AA3, selection of board representative of the County Committee on School District Organization. Who's sitting in that seat now? Trustee Brown, is that something you'd like to continue to do? I'll motion that trustee Brown continues in that position.
I'll second.
Second, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Trustee Brown continues in our county committee for school district operations. Selection of board representative alternate to the Salida Area Public Facilities Financing Board. I have had members of the Salida community ask if I would do this job. It is the only one I will ask for tonight because I have recently taken an appointment from the mayor to be on the Modesto City Charter Committee, which is going to chew up a great deal of my time next year. And so, having been asked if there was willing to nominate in second, I would take this. If not, we can leave it with trustee Marks. So with that being said. Second, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Do we need to do an alternate
I
though?
was gonna say an alternate as well. Would we like to keep you trustee Marks, if you'd be willing?
I would like to, yeah.
Because you've been there for a while, I would like to motion trustee Marks as the alternate. Looking for a second.
Second.
Trustee Newman, all those in favor of trustee Marks being the alternate? Aye? Aye. Passes unanimously. We look like we know what we're doing here tonight. Selection of board representative alternates to the SIFA board. This is the one I was on last year. Trustee Newman's been doing it. So we're looking for a motion of who would like to be on the SIFA. Trustee Brown, I see a light.
So I just have to let you know that I would very frequently be in conflict with that because I work for a developer. So,
Oh.
so I cannot.
But it builds your knowledge on all the things board
I
related
will
to
support
buildings.
that, but I can't sit on it.
I can go ahead and continue serving.
We have another member who would like to serve on the SIFA board. I think it's two of us. Okay, I'll pick that one up as well. I'll do both so long as they're not in conflict. They're only twice a year. So, motion to keep trustee Newman and trustee Walker on the SIFA board. Motion by trustee Marks, second by trustee West. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. A86, selection of board representative, Cal SSD. I believe that's currently trustee Marks. That's a traveling bit. Is,
About 6 times a year, I believe we meet, about 6 times a year in Sacramento. And is that right? Am I right? 4 to 6. 4 to 6. It depends on what's happening in legislation. I'm happy if anybody else wants to do it. I don't,
I don't have the time, and I think you're running your own business now, you're teaching, so I think all things being equal, let's let trustee Marks keep running up to Sacramento.
I can do it, yes.
All right, so
All right.
I'll make the motion to keep trustee Marks, looking for a second. Trustee Brown, second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. Okay, selection of a board representative and one additional board member to serve on the district audit committee. By default, trustee West is going to be there as vice president. So we're looking for one more member who would like to be on the annual audit committee, which was
Is it
last
annual?
week. Trustee Newman. So, that being said, all those in favor of trustee Newman and trustee West being our audit committee members? Aye? Aye.
Okay, aye.
7, unanimous, done. That was the quickest board reorganization in the history of Modesto City School District. So, I think two of us have to sort of switch chairs, and trustee Marks is moving over here. I'll grab
Okay, that's.
that chair.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, John.
Lopez would like to talk on C7. I am going to ask you to pull C6 so I can say, no, you knew that.
All right, yes, I did.
All things being equal, let me grab my stuff and get out of your way.
All right, no worries. Thank you. Oh, and don't forget your computer.
I'm coming back.
Okay, good.
Seat's warm.
Thank you for your patience. Ooh, this mic's a little more sensitive than mine was.
Steal my
Good,
water.
that's your water.
That plug. Trustee Irvin's got a big, massive pluggy thing over there.
Put it here.
You're good? You made it?
To get this back. Oh, wait. Okay, so moving on to the approval of the consent agenda, I have a note that there are a few items to be, thank you, to be pulled off of consent. So I have item C6. Pardon? Yes?
I know for the one I wanted, it was just to be pulled on a separate vote, not to be pulled off a consent.
Mine too.
So
Okay,
pulling off a consent would mean be put it on discussion. I don't need that for C6.
okay. Is that the case for you
We're on
as
the
well?
same team and we didn't even discuss it. We're clear
Okay.
of the Brown Act.
All right.
Amen.
And then I have an item D5 that I was gonna also so these are only gonna be pulled for non-discussion unless someone else would like to have them on for discussion. Does anyone wish to have them on for discussion?
No, but I think
Okay.
Trustee Lopez would like to discuss C7.
All right, so C7. So we'll pull C7 to discussion.
I don't think he wants to do this. He just wants to talk about it when you get there.
No, I just want, once we get, I just want to make a recommendation on the
Make a
On the
comment?
item, sorry.
Okay. So what I'm gonna do is, I am going to, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna pull them off. We can just vote, we'll vote on them separately, but we'll vote on them after the student representative board report, after B1. So we'll just vote, we'll just say we're voting on item C6, then we'll vote on item C7, and then D5, unless you have another way to do that.
No, we need to do it with the approval of the consent agenda.
Yes.
We do that, and then we vote off these separately. They're on the consent agenda, and we vote on them separately.
Yes,
So that would be the only way to do it, and so we can't,
That's right.
we're pulling it out of order if we pull him
Yes.
first.
So that's what I'd like to do, is have them take them off consent.
No.
You still want them on consent?
Yes, we still want them on
okay.
consent. They're
Okay.
just separate items to
Separate.
vote for on consent. So
Alright.
they're at this point in the agenda,
Okay.
and unless you want your item to discussion.
All right. So we're taking off. We're
Pulling
going to
one
vote on all of them
minus
except these three, and then
minus
we're going to vote on
C6.
these three together.
C6.
Yes, and C7 and D5. So,
okay.
except for C6 and D5, and that's correct. All right, so all those in favor of the consent agenda excluding C6, C7, and D5, all those in favor say aye.
We need a motion. I motion we approve.
Okay?
I'll second.
Second. Oh, back to you.
Aye, and I forgot to go to public. Does public have any comment before we? Does public, no comment from public? All right. So, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, so that one, so the consent agenda passes. And now for the votes on item C6. All those in favor of C6, all those, are there any motions for item C6?
I'd like to comment as to why I'm saying no, just so that it's clear,
Okay.
sort of on our board protocols, it talks about why we would say no. I think essentially no for me resolves from the issue I had when we talked about this, when it was actually as a board discussion action item. I felt the separation / prenup agreement was a bit much more than I can handle. I think coming out of our facilities meeting, it was clear that we're not going to be doing as much fixing of facilities as I thought we would. That being said, I think any energy savings at this point is a Google search and best practices. I'm not interested in bringing in a third-hand contractor at this point to do something I think we can manage internally. And just my general opposition to bringing outsiders in when it's not necessary. And that's why I'll be voting no.
Okay, Ms. Newman?
And I'm going to be voting no. I just didn't really like the terms of the contract. And I know our staff tried as hard as they could to negotiate better terms, but I think that there's maybe got to be a better way to do it.
Okay. So, does the public have any comment? Back to the board for a vote and a motion. So is there a motion on item C6?
I'll make the motion.
All right, so we have a motion from Mr. Brown. Is there a second? Second from Mr. Irvin. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed?
No.
So we have 4-3 split vote. So we have Mr. Irvin, Mrs. West, Mrs. Marks, and Mr. Brown all voting yes, and then there's 3 no votes. Correct? So we have Mr. Walker, Ms. Newman, and Mr. Lopez. All right, just want to make sure I saw that correctly. Okay, item C7. Was there any discussion? Did you have a comment?
So this is the approval of service agreement with Transport Group in terms of transportation operations assessment, and so I'm totally in favor of that. It's something that I've been talking with Dr. Noguchi for some time about some concerns with transportations. So I wanted to make a recommendation that that the community input and having community sessions around transportation be available for our families when we're doing this assessment, and that be a part of the assessment as well.
Okay.
Yeah, if I may, I appreciate the comment, and I apologize that you haven't seen the agreement. The agreement contains 6 tasks in the agreement. One of them is stakeholder engagement, task 5. And I'll just read you just a sentence out of there from this group. It says, our experience indicates that the only path to success is to engage and communicate to the school's community early in the process and throughout its planning and implementation. Our approach will be to properly identify and allocate resources, to properly engage and inform each of the stakeholder groups to address their concerns, communicate, and discuss the options. So that is that is already built in. I can send you a forward.
No, great. I'm glad. I just wanted to make sure that was. I know it's a concern of some of our family members, so I wanted to make sure that it was there. But I'm glad that it was already there.
Yes,
So,
that was a concern of ours as well. So thank you.
thank you very much.
So any comments from the public? Back to the board for a vote. Do I have a motion? Okay, moved by Ms. Newman, seconded by Trustee Lopez. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Item D5, I had voted no on this on the last one for the first reading, and so I'm voting no on the second reading of it, just to be consistent. So is there anyone in the public wishes to comment? All right. Seeing none? Okay. Motion by Ms. Newman, Trustee Newman, seconded by Trustee West. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
All those opposed? And we have 1 no with Ms. Marks. All right, moving on to item A10, approval of order of discussion action items. Is there any questions or changes from the board? Seeing none, is there anyone in the public wishing to comment? Seeing none, back to the board for a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Newman, Trustee Newman. Seconded by Trustee Walker. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Period for public presentation. I have, I believe, 1 card. I had 1 card. Thank you. There it is. I have a card from Phil Vallejo. Is this correct? Did I say it correct? Yes, you're welcome to pass them out.
We like homework.
So I figured since you invited me to come, I would just kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I'm from Enox, and I've been there for 7 years. And in the time that I've been there, we've experienced a lot of growth. Although the one area that hasn't grown quite as much, whereas when I got there was 110 students, now we're at 230 students in the program. When I got there was 70 students in the marching band, and now there's 83 students in the marching band. There's 170 kids in band. And the biggest reason why the students are not participating in the marching band is that it just costs too much money. And we don't have any fees, but we're honest with the parents on what it would take to create the kind of marching band that they would like. When I was growing up, I grew up in Riverbank, and we were always looking over to Modesto City Schools at the time, 5 schools, And we just thought, man, if we can only have a marching band like those schools, that would be so cool. And so then when I got here, I think there was 3 marching bands, and now there's 2, Bayer and Enox. And I think, I can't speak for the other directors, but my general sense is that it's funding based as well. As you can see on the left side, those are all the stipends for football and girls basketball and boys basketball. I just chose those 3 sports as being popular sports. On the right hand side, you can see all the positions that are required to run a marching band and how they're funded by the district at 0. And you can see what the boosters fund for each of those seasons. So the district is supporting football and both girls and boys basketball at near $70,000, and whereas the boosters have to come up with $55,000. You can see the comparison on transportation. What we asked the marching band students: winter percussion, winter guard. You can see how that reflects differently for athletics. And you can see what they ask their students to try and fundraise in some situations as a student, in other situations as a program, whereas our students are asked to bring in $677, $685, $514. Beyond that, the boosters have to then raise an additional $42,000 to help us help make ends meet. You can also see that on the far right hand side where it says staff cost, that's how much we would be able to knock off our fair share program. So anyway, I brought a little bit of this to the board a year and a half ago with the other directors, and now I just bringing it back in hopes that there can be some follow-up on your behalf. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Vallejo. All right, let's pass that over. All right, time for our student representative report.
All right, so last Tuesday we had our inter-high meeting, which is December 3rd, and it's kind of a recent meeting since our last meeting was the 21st of November, and also not all the schools came this time, which is the first time that's happened. Usually we have all attendance, but I don't have as much information as I usually do, but honestly, the last meeting we spent pretty much the whole time talking about the issue of vaping, which was brought up to us at the last meeting for us to discuss, but we spent a lot more time brainstorming. Actually, someone who came was Tom Nipper, who's the head of supervision over at Enox, and because he's the head of supervision, he obviously knows a lot of stuff about locking down on students who vape or are involved with drugs, and he knows a lot about reforms you can do to help prevent, and so he gave us a lot of ideas to start preventative campaigns, to tackle the issue of vaping. I brought this up last meeting, but one still really big idea we have is the vape sensors, which Robbie DeMont brought up, and he's done his research, and he said that we've found smoke alarms that are tamper-proof and ready to go in school bathrooms, but we're still the Inter-High Council is still wondering for the board to talk about the budgeting and how we could fund that, and the students can contribute to that too. We could sell merchandise and draw funds. The Inter-High Council thought of a cool slogan, "Escape the Vape," and we can put them on T-shirts, other merchandise items, and sell them across the district for all high schools to buy. And yeah, so Inter-High Council was just curious on the possibility of funding from the board perspective. Another thing we tackled about the vaping issue is from the conduct code side of things. We're looking at the consequences of vaping, and we noticed that one way we can help is maybe go into the conduct code and edit it, maybe make the consequences or fortify them in a sense to make students more hesitant to vape or smoke. Mr. Nipper was talking about how a lot of the schools, what they do is, they catch a kid vaping and they suspend them for 2 to 3 days. But we were talking about how oftentimes those are the kids who are usually just going to go home and continue what they do, now that they're free, and unfortunately maybe their parents aren't home around to watch them. So we could, put consequences oh, you can't go into this activity, or you can't go to these basketball games, and if you're a senior, you can't go to the senior trip, which I know Mr. Nipper saying we have stuff like that, but it's not for every single offense, and sometimes when students are caught, he was talking about how just the other day he had caught a student with 3 vape pens, and he was obviously going to sell them, and all that kid had was a 30-minute detention, and then he was good to go. Obviously those things were confiscated, but that's not really preventative and not helping the issue at hand, more just, giving the kid detention time. So I think what we were all saying is kind of going back and looking at the conduct code and just taking a look at the consequences and what we can do there, so kids actually learn and learn from their mistakes. For that, so that was the whole vaping side of things, but that's pretty much the whole meeting at Inter High. Every Inter High we talk about what the schools are going, what's happening at each school. Like I said, not all the schools were there, but Enoch's had their formal. Davis had a movie night for the students, and schools are continuing to do stuff for the community. They had canned food drives and clothes drives, which I kind of bring up every time after Inter High, which is good because that's good. Schools are continuing to do that, especially in this holiday season, so that's good. And they, like I said, donate food and clothes to local needy families. And then for the Tournament of Talent, finally, we're sorting out the sponsors right now, and we're drawing a lot from the sponsors that we used last year, and we're going to brainstorm any more if we need to draw in more funds. But, that's pretty much it. If y'all got any questions.
Mr. Walker?
I do have one question, and not a question, but could you forward me the information you guys came up with on the vape sensors?
Sure, yeah.
I don't know how that plays out, but now that I don't have that job anymore, I've got some free time. It'd be interesting to see what I could put together, at least as far as research, and then potentially work with the superintendent and business service. What would that cost, or at least get an idea of what you guys are looking at? And I would agree on the discipline side. I don't know what to do there. The EDCO's not friendly on that front. But I'm a fan of Mr. Nipper, and I would agree that 30 minutes isn't going to solve a problem. And we've had a couple of other issues at Enoch with vaping machines in the not too distant past being hustled out of the trunk of a car as well. And so there's clearly an issue that isn't unique to Enoch's, I'm sure, but is an issue that we certainly need to look at how we get preventive and find a way to sort of discourage that from getting off the ground given where we're at today with that topic. And I appreciate the report. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Superintendent Noguchi?
So Arnoff, I'm going to encourage you to work with Mr. Herbst and develop a proposal, both with the different elements that you outlined. One is the prevention, the sensor piece, which I guess that could be prevention in some regard also, and also the disciplinary, in addition to just marketing it, right? You said you came up with some good slogans. So put that together in a proposal, and we can take a look at cost that out and then bring that back to the board. So it'd be a great learning experience for you on putting together a proposal and all the different elements, working together, and then coming back and presenting it to the board.
Okay, sounds good. I'll definitely do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President West?
Just tagging on to that, I was going to ask if you were looking at doing these in just the high school bathrooms or in the junior high school bathrooms as well. And I was interested in a cost analysis. So when you do your report, if you can include that information, I would appreciate it.
Okay, yeah, I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. But
Oh, no,
yeah.
no. Just in your report. I would be interested to know.
I
Thank you.
got you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone in the public wishing to comment? Seeing, oh, yes.
I don't wish to comment on that topic, but I would like, before our student rep, Arnav Krishnamurthy, is kind of relinquished his speaking time, to recognize I think he had a very big moment in the last week or two around a college acceptance, maybe to Stanford or something, I'm hearing. So that's pretty big stuff. Congratulations, Arnav. Well done.
That's great. Gotta be proud, and your parents gotta be proud too. All right, moving on to item B2, the superintendent's mid-year progress report.
Alrighty. This presentation tonight is going to be a little bit longer than what you're used to. For the most part, I coach Cabinet and others to do a presentation between 10 minutes and 15 minutes. This one is going to be a bit longer. And as a result, the agenda is also bifurcated, if you will. In other words, we've kept some, thank you for that. We've kept a number of other items off so to be able to ensure that we have the time. The presentation tonight is really twofold. First, it's to take a look at the superintendent's evaluation goals, which is on the blue sheet in front of you. It's the goals that we came up with together last June on really focusing my work. So I want to be able to do a mid-year there. But the larger part of this presentation is really beyond the goals. There's a lot of work that's going on in the district, not only work that is currently happening that's new and innovative, but also the planning for next year. So I want you all to be just really clear with what's going on now and what's going on in the future, so you could help with questions from the community as we really look to market our district and really showcase the great work that we're doing. So it is a little bit longer. I am going to have Cabinet talk a little bit about each of the slides that they have, 2 or 3 minutes at the most, and then I will take the lead on this particular presentation. And the clicker works. That's wonderful. So, purpose of the presentation is to give you just a brief overview of goal 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the superintendent's goal. The first goal is the department analysis. If you remember last year, we were taking a deep dive in a number of our departments. Outside consultants came in and gave us recommendations for year 1, year 2, and year 3. My goal for this year was to ensure that we completed all the year 1 goals, and to a large degree, many of them have already been completed. So we will get a summary from Cabinet on the departments that had an analysis. The second was goal 2, which was to develop a principal and counselor dashboards. We will give you an update on that. Goal 3 was to really look at how do we develop internal accountability, meaning how do we hold each other accountable to get the work done as a district as a whole, both principals, extended cabinet, and cabinet as a whole. So it's not just looking at numbers, external accountability, but internal accountability. How do we hold ourselves accountable? I'll talk a little bit about the system that we're creating there. And then the last goal there is fiscal and operationally sound, really ensuring that we've got the eye on the budget and we're looking at our budgetary practices. And I'll talk a little bit about where we are in goal 4. The lion's share of this presentation really lies in the beyond the goals, and that's the update, not only in current work, but also work that we're planning for next year. Before I go to the department analysis, I do want to give kind of a caveat. It was really difficult to have Cabinet just have one slide and have 2 minutes, because they could take a whole presentation for 45 minutes and all the work that they're doing. So I've really tried to condense their work and really just focus it on what the department analysis said and what those year 1 goals are. So if you take a look at their presentation for their one slide and you're like, well, are you doing this, and this? It's probably yes, they are, but I had them focus in on just a particular year 1 goals. So you're reminded these are the 5 departments that had a department analysis. First one was educational services, business services, information and technology services, human resources, and special education was done the year prior to me getting here. So Mr. Herbst will be reporting on really year 3 recommendations as he closes out all those recommendations that were outlined in that particular department analysis. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Goodell, who's going to start with education services.
Thank you, Superintendent. Board President Marks, Cabinet, it's my pleasure this evening to talk about the work that has been completed in educational services since last spring. We've done quite a bit of work, as you'll see, I think, through the night. First bullet, increased support to sites, principal coaching. We've developed a new model for supporting our site administrators and supporting coaching and developing their leadership with our principals, our APs, as well as our vice principals. Our senior directors of school leadership are out at sites daily. That is the vast majority of their workload is spent out supporting sites and administrators. We've visited a model school district, Long Beach Unified, down in LA, to see how they do this model, where they work this model around coaching and supporting their site administrators, as well as the alignment. We spent time aligning our district strategic goals, LCAP, SPSA, and evaluation goals to create a more coherent coaching model for our site administrators. We've also obviously restructured our division as well as our administrator meetings and created a focus on K-12. And one of the main focuses in Ed Services this year is about building the capacity of our professionals. So that was a big step for us, combining those meetings so that our K-6, 7, 8, and 9, 12 administrators, both VPs, APs, and principals, are learning from one another about our total system and not just their specific grade level. We're working to improve communication within and between schools. This is a heavy lift. Some things that we've done this year is create a flash, a weekly, basically a newsletter that captures important information from our different divisions that go directly out to site administrators. We're working on a principal's year at a glance, updating that so principals will know month by month what the key components of their job duties are and what they need to be taking into consideration. As well as working with our sites in that coaching model, supporting our senior directors with a biweekly coaching cycle so that each site gets similar coaching and knows what to expect. Fourth bullet there is developing a principal leadership pipeline. We've created different avenues by which we're supporting our professionals. Leaders in Learning is one avenue by which we're supporting our teacher leaders that are interested in pursuing a preliminary administrative credential. We have Future Principals Workshop where we're supporting our VPs and APs in building up their capacity to be principals. A new admin PD, which is a take on something that we've been doing, supporting them, our new administrators, and we just rolled out a leadership coaching program for our experienced veteran principals to begin to develop the coaching skills to mentor and support our new administrators. And then last but not least, you can see building the capacity of our teacher leaders, which goes to some of those programs and workshops that I just mentioned, as well as building involvement with the committees that we're with to just build the capacity of our teacher leaders and our administrators in our district. So that's been the bulk of our work thus far.
Good evening, President Marks, trustees. This is highlight business services, and the first bullet is through the leadership of Dr. Noguchi and the various committees that have been established that were mentioned earlier. This is a huge lift. This is a big lift for the district. A budget study committee. Budget study committees have they're not as prevalent as they were during the recession time because of the implementation of the local control funding formula and the LCAP advisory group, which guides the direction of supplemental and concentration grant funds. However, the budget, as pointed out by President Marks, this committee really had a great meeting last time. This was the third meeting, and it allowed mutual participation and input from the various stakeholders there, which included the board, which included our bargaining units, and the committee gelled together and was willing to share, and there's going to be some great things come from this committee outlining the challenges we face with our budget and the various input from numerous stakeholders. The last four bullets are part of our district our budget, our business study that was done. Reorganization to include the risk management department. This really aligns with risk management is focused around most of our property and liability insurance. So this aligned with business services. It aligned with the duties of business services. And the next bullet was joining a property JPA, a joint powers authority. As you know, on October 1st, with the board's approval, we joined the largest pool provider of property and liability insurance, Northern California Relief. It's the largest public school entity in Northern California, not only to reduce our costs, but it increased the benefits that we have from participating in this program. The next one is increasing our architectural pool to close out current and past projects. Earlier was mentioned about the numerous facility projects that we have going on, not only that we've done this summer and highlighted, but in the future with the two bond measures that we have coming up. We were using 1 to 2 architect firms in the past to get the work done. We've expanded that to about 6 to 8, and so there's no concern with the number of projects that we have planned during the summer at various schools, getting those into the approval process and getting them closed out. But we also have a number of projects in the past that we have to work to close out as well that limit us from new projects at those sites. So we're very excited to have a team now of architects, about 6 to 8, that we're working with on current projects and future projects. And the last one will be very exciting to many of our staff, is implementing a travel software. It's very burdensome, the way we do it in our district, to reserve travel arrangements, to encumber travel arrangements, and then when you're done, to process the request to get refunded. We're going to an electronic travel software system that will speed up the process and really be less cumbersome on our employees, not only making the travel, but once they return from the travel and getting the necessary reimbursement.
Good evening, President Marks and board. The first agenda item I have up there is technology restructure, which will be coming to the board in January, and we're working through items with CSA and MTA over December and January. Is our job, just to be candid, our job descriptions are obsolete. They might be 10 years old, 15 years old. So we're working through that, as well as some adjustment and some recommended salary ranges for hardworking staff. The second agenda item there is establishment of technology standards and cost effectiveness. Two specific examples is looking at the standard of our TVs. We went with an industrial strength TV, but there's ways to get a more cost-effective TV that's about half that price and yet get the warranty on it, as well as we're piloting Chromebooks currently. And again, that should probably, if the pilot's successful, which will be coming back to the board to give our findings in January to look at a field test, that could save the district up to $6 million for future purchases of laptops moving forward. Development of procedures and processes. Specifically, I look at this in two areas, both our customers. An example of that is when a request comes of a software, maybe of a purchase that's over $5,000, we do a formal industry practice of analysis. What is the needs? What is the end game we're looking for? And what's the total cost of ownership, as well as implementation and training that's needed? And then internally, we're looking at standard operation procedures, which means if I'm at a school site and I'm a site tech, what is the standard practices we want to do, proactive maintenance, things like that, as well as processes internally of creating stakeholder with our customers as well as with our internal staff. And specifically, we're creating what I call a little strike force, which every team member in the department has the ability to help us create our new standards. Specifically, an example is our new help desk system we're looking at for accountability and helping ourselves be more organized. The second to last bullet point, customer service standards, that comes in the form of a priority matrix that when we do our little strike force teams working with what is the expectation of our customers and how do we measure that? So that would be internal customer service, as well as which you've seen these little screen cleaners. So that's the idea that we're creating a culture where you have a central number you call. No matter what your problem is, you don't have to look around and make sure that that tech is in the office that day or out sick or on vacation. So that's an example of building up a standard customer service practice. And then the building capacity of staff, currently working on Wi-Fi training for staff so that every staff member, which that's the new infrastructure is Wi-Fi, we all feel comfortable supporting whether it be a site tech or getting into more technical details of a network engineer. And the last one is a specific infrastructure upgrade is the server system that will have that. We're changing from a Microsoft strategy to an industry strategy of VM. When I say server, it's actually 200 virtual servers that we'll be upgrading over the next few months and migrating all of our data to that system and infrastructure.
Thank you.
Good evening, trustees. HR has undergone significant changes in the past year to position ourselves to really support the district goals and Goal 5 in particular. And it's been a lot of work. To date, we've implemented the vast majority of our department analysis recommendations. So we're making really good progress there. We've worked together to establish a department vision and mission, working with department members on that. And I'd say the most substantial change has been our restructure to align, distribute, and streamline our workflow, make ourselves more efficient. The second significant change has been the conversion of paper-driven processes to online documents and routing through our contract with Inform K-12. We've converted roughly a dozen forms to automated online workflow with more forms scheduled for launch here in the near future. We've established and continue to reinforce standards for a professional work environment and expectations for exceptional service and how we engage with all of our clients in the district. Efforts are currently underway to revise our certificated evaluation process. We're working with our labor partners through negotiations, MTA, to examine our current procedures and best practices. And the goal is going to be to make our evaluation process more current and user-friendly, but also ensuring a structure that allows for meaningful feedback for those being evaluated. As part of the district reorg, the board approved a senior director position to focus our work in the areas of recruitment and retention. Major projects include the creation of internal data systems, completion of exit interviews for employees separating from the district, which we did not do previously and has been the source of a lot of helpful data. Launch of a new hire survey so we can get feedback on the hiring and onboarding experience. And working with the team to coordinate the successful MCS classified hiring event held last month, among other projects. For the hiring event, we collaborated with Communications Office to promote the event, and those efforts really hit the mark. We had 700 individuals pre-register for the event, and approximately 425 attended physically here in the staff development room. We conducted over 100 on-site interviews for paraprofessional, nutrition, and other classified positions. It was very well organized. We had an outstanding response from the community in terms of candidates seeking employment, and is a great example of cross-departmental collaboration. Last, I previously reported on the work of the Health Benefits Committee following the approval of the agreement with Alliant, the broker who will be facilitating our work going forward, examining the benefit program and structures that we have. At our next meeting in January, we're going to review the results of Alliant's analysis and the large volume of data that we've provided to them. In summary, we've really inserted a lot of change into the system, been real proud of the department, and I'm confident in the direction we're going to support the district goals.
All right, special education has been very, very busy implementing the suggestions of the departmental study. I want to highlight probably the biggest part of the study, which was a call for the district to develop a multi-tiered system of support to address the high number of students that were at risk within the district. Due to the direction of the board and following the recommendation of the report, we have replicated the Marshall Learning Center, which was highlighted in the Gillespie report, at 6 additional school sites for a total of 7. Results have been great so far. Plans on the way for expansion next year, assuming that we continue to get good outcomes. In addition, the district continues to develop the behavioral end of an MTSS framework, and that's expanding the social emotional learning and supports that we have at each one of our school sites. We're proud with where we're at this year and look to continue to expand both through professional development and actually hands-on support. Especially another one of the key components of it was we've developed a systematic method for assessing and determining whether a student requires additional assistance from an adult as part of their IEP. The newly created procedures requires an assessment, and this assessment is vital because it leads to the appropriate frequency, duration, and location for the service to take place. The assessment also allows us to be able to develop meaningful goals and fade plans for when a student develops more and more or greater independence, I should say. To address the large number of students that we had receiving contracted door-to-door transportation, we worked with our transportation department to identify students with moderate disabilities who could actually ride an MCS bus. And last year, we were successful in bringing back a number of students who ride general education bus instead of the contracted vendor. We also developed a transportation decision tree. That decision tree is currently used to guide IEP teams if and when a child needs to receive door-to-door transportation, they go through that process first. And finally, perhaps one of the ones I'm most I'm proud of all of them, but one of the recommendations was ongoing professional development in high leverage areas. So since the report, we have developed our own modules, a whole slew of them, some of which include best practices on assessments and a number of handicapping conditions. Very proud of our Paraprofessional Pro series that we have that gives our paraprofessionals a number of high leverage training areas and support. We've done design training on universal design for learning, managing problematic behaviors in the classroom, and finally, the work that we're doing on inclusive practices.
Thank you, Cabinet. So as you can see for Goal 1, while you don't have the action plans in front of you, the majority of the Year 1 goals have been completed or are in the process of being completed. So I anticipate in April when we come back for the evaluation that Goal 1 will in fact be mastered. That certainly wouldn't happen if it wasn't for the leadership in this room and around these tables. So appreciate all the work that Cabinet has done at staying focused on ensuring that we get those those first year goals completed. So the second goal was to further develop our dashboard. In this particular, it was going to be our academic dashboard, both a dashboard for the principal and dashboard for the counselor. A large part of the beginning of the year was really continuing to focus on our chronic absenteeism and our attendance dashboards, not only in further refining them, but also supporting principals in utilizing them. I can confidently say now that all the principals are using it and we are looking at it, and you're going to see some great results in attendance and chronic absenteeism that we'll be able to showcase for you. But Goal 2 was really about working to develop a principal and counselor dashboard. So there are 4 things that are outlined here. First was work with stakeholders. So what, principal, what would you like as a dashboard? When you walk into the office in the morning, what is it that you want to see to help you in the work that you do? And also to the counselors, what is it that you need? So we looked at the specifics for the academic dashboards. We then looked at the data that we had, how clean is that data, how accurate is that data, and where is the data in our current system to see how we could match those up. And then lastly, we took a look at how do we want that displayed. Some of the data dashboards that you will see coming in the spring, and we will come back in March or April, there'll be dashboards around A through G completions, AP and IB, not only pass rate, but participation. The CST grade, the passing rates of the CTE courses and pathways. how many kids have completed the syllabi literacy, also grades, and how are our English language learners doing? What is their progress moving forward? Goal 3, this one was a little different because there's not a particular data point that you can put on this. This is really looking at how do we create a system where we hold each other accountable, much like the board. How is it that Vice President Newman at the time and President Walker and together in those 2 years, how did they work to create a system from the time that I was first hired here to create internal accountability such that you guys began to work as a team? Well, I'm trying to create those same conditions both with our principals and also with our extended cabinet. So with that, we call them the leadership summits. We have multiple leadership summits. So for cabinet and extended cabinet, you'll see the dates up there. We are quickly approaching our second summit. And for the principals, we have the summit 3 times. So what is a summit? A summit is such that you work in a team of 4 people, 4 team members that you're with the entire year. That team has a set of SMART goals, a total of 4, and those SMART goals are aligned directly to our district goals that we all developed last year together. We take a look at the data. So how are you progressing towards chronic absenteeism or attendance or whatever their particular goal is? What actions have you taken since the last time we talked? And what's your barriers? What's stopping you from reaching your goals, or what's stopping you from being able to improve the data that you now are sharing? So that is all done in a very scripted, very formatted process. At the very end of that, the 4 folks talk together in looking at ways of overcoming those barriers and also next steps. So I want to talk a little bit about, and this is just the second slide on goal 3, is what is a SMART goal? A SMART goal is really at the foundation of this team. If we have a team of 4 of us, and one of my goals is, the first one, by June 2020, the chronic absenteeism rate will decrease by 2%, moving from 15.3 in June of 2019 to 13.3 to June 2020. In that particular team, I'm going to identify everything that I'm doing for chronic absenteeism, what the current data is for the last 3 or 4 months, what are the barriers are in front of me, and then we'll talk about how we can create better conditions for the next time that we meet. We don't change those goals remain the same throughout the whole year. One thing nice this year is that extended cabinet, we've divided out the district goals, so all of the district goals are represented by at least one person within extended cabinet. So everybody, all of our district goals, somebody owns every one of those goals. So someone's keeping their eye on the mark. For instance, chronic absenteeism, that's not just one person, right? One person's the owner and the lead of that, but there's many people that play to that particular goal. There's principals, there's teachers, there's administration, there's data. There's many people that play into that. But there's a lead, and that's the person that ultimately is held accountable for that. There's 2 other additional SMART goals. I'm going to go to the 3rd bullet because not all of the SMART goals are academic in nature. This one is really the work orders by June 2020. The work order response time will be reduced by 10%, moving a work order from 10 days in the system to 9 days in the system. So everyone has a piece to play, not just teachers in the classroom or principals, but also maintenance and operations as well. For goal 4, and there's 2 slides on this one, and this one's a big one, and Mr. Zerley spoke a little bit about this, and so did Trustee Marks, our President Marks, around the budget study. So the 4th goal was really to take a look at our fiscal and operationally sound, and how do we look at reducing our budget deficits. There's really 2 ways of doing this. First, it's identifying where we could reduce in our budget. But more importantly, how can we increase our revenue? And I'm going to talk about both of those, and I have 2 slides with us moving forward. First is identifying budget reductions, and this has really come through the budget study. In addition to cabinet's work, each of our cabinet meetings, when we're looking at spending dollars, we ask ourselves, is this something that we need to? Is it a want or is it a need as we move forward? We're certainly looking at our technology expenses. We're looking at reorganizing our departments, not necessarily to capitalize on dollars and positions there. In some cases, yes. But how can we create better conditions for our teachers in the classroom and be more efficient and effective? Because that ultimately will save us dollars as we become more efficient and effective in the work that we do. How do we maximize our supplemental concentration? Really looking at staffing, both at the high school level and the elementary level. What are the class sizes and how can we potentially capitalize on any areas there? In some cases, there's classes at the high school that have 11 and 14. Is that really the best use of our money? In some cases, it is. If it's an AP Physics, not every school has enough kids to be able to fill that class, and we need to offer AP Physics. So what can we do differently in the years out to possibly do distance learning, where we have one teacher, let's say at Mohai, that's teaching, that is in front of them, they have 6 kids, and we Skype in 2 other schools with 4 kids here and 6 kids here. I think there's a way of really looking at that, and through the budget study, we're exploring those options. The next piece is identifying revenue increases, and I have another slide about that as well. First, I'm happy to say that our interdistricts, I talked about that last year, we have a massive amount of kids going out, but we also have some kids coming in. This year I can say that we have 200 more kids coming in than we had last year at this time. So that's a positive 200 students. Are we still losing kids? Absolutely. But next year I'd like to come back with another 200. So over the course of 2 years, that's 400. We also need to take a look at attracting more students by, one, marketing our innovative programs, but also creating some innovative programs. And I'm going to talk about both of those, both marketing and adding here in just a second. Increasing our revenue. So this is some work that everyone has been a part of, and somebody has this on a SMART goal that's going to come back in their summits and be very happy and proud to be able to report this data. Our attendance at this time, as of last week when this was published, we went from, in 2018, from 95.04 to 95.49. So we are up a 0.45, which is significant given that we just went through Thanksgiving break, and usually that we really plummet there. And we haven't really gotten our Saturday schools out in full force. We've had 2 Saturday schools, but we know we're going to capitalize on more. So I anticipate this number to go up. The next one, chronic absenteeism, is one of the hardest data points to move and to change. And at this point right now, we are down 2.56, which is a significant number. And I really have to say hats off to our principals for working on both of those data points. Not only is it good fiscally, but it's the right thing to do for our kids because they're in the classroom and they're learning. So we're proud at that data point. Next piece, going back to increasing our revenue, we talked about marketing our district, and I won't go too much in depth there because you just had that marketing plan, really looking at marketing our CTE, our extended kinder, our RISE extended day, promoting preschool, and promoting our innovative programming. And Ms. Noonan shared that just a few board meetings back. I want to touch on innovative programs for next year. So what's in the works right now? Because if we say that we're going to start a program, that just doesn't happen. It happens only by design and by a lot of hard work on the front end. So we're going to talk through some of these bullets here. We have a lot in the system, a lot of new in the system. And what I've learned as a leader, leading systems, is you can only put so much in the system. I equate it to a balloon. You can blow up a balloon just to the right spot and be able to have progress. But you can also pop that balloon if you put too much into it. So we have to be really cognizant on what we're putting in, even though there's a lot of great stuff. We just have to be cognizant of that. So I want to go through all of these, because these are items that we're going to be adding in or recommending to be adding in for next year. First, JROTC. We know that, and that was shared at the last board meeting. We have 3 feeder patterns that we're looking at putting STEM or STREAM activities into the feeder pattern, and I want to share those. One is at Tuolumne. So Tuolumne, Hanshaw, and Johansson, Beard, Roosevelt, and Davis, and then Rose, La Loma, and Davis. Now, what we're going to start in the elementary is really, from my perspective, and it may get tweaked as we go through the spring because we're in the planning session right now. So this is a hot topic because we're right in the middle of building this. But really, it's the before and after school options for kids. So when they're dropped off in the morning and when they stay for after school programming, we're really looking at putting coding in the elementary schools, all of our elementary schools, but those particular feeder patterns, we really want to focus on computer science and engineering. And we just had 12 folks go off to a conference around Project Lead the Way, which is really going to help guide that work. again, we're at the beginning stages of planning, but I believe we can get this off the ground. Next, we want to look at expanding our summer school options. We've spent a lot of time in remediation in summer school, but you know what? There's a whole lot of enrichment that can be done as well. Project Lead the Way activities can go into there as well. I don't know that we can land that this summer, but the following summer definitely, but really looking at expanding those options. We also are looking at expanding summer school for our English language learners specifically, because we've got to start hitting that long-term English learner. Our rate is way too high, and so we need to start early and very strategic with our K-4. I heard from our key communicators. I have a group called the Key Communicators, and it's business and industry and leaders in our town that comes and gives me advice every couple months. And I brought to them really, what do we do about this declining enrollment and how do we bring folks in? And one of the things that they shared was junior high athletics themselves as parents, and also listening to fellow neighbors and such. They've heard that many parents take kids to other districts for junior high because they want their kids placed at high school athletics and they want them to have an opportunity to have sports. So we are going to be looking at increasing and expanding our junior high athletics. This really is a 2-year plan. We can't do it all in 1 year. But so we're looking at expanding part of it next year. The other piece is junior high activities. I have to say this is the first district I've been in that doesn't have an activities director for junior high. Just our part, a 0.4, like 2 periods of the day where they are working with their leadership kids to be able to provide activities for, let me go back there. Activities for kids at lunchtime and after school. Not only does it build the leadership of the junior high, but it also gets kids involved and excited, and it really speaks to the culture. So we're going to work to expand that. Also recognizing our schools that have GATE. There are classes from grades 4, 5, and 6 that in looking at class sizes that we can add some kids in those classes. So I really want to capitalize on the spaces that we have there. So looking to ensure that we are maximizing class size at our GATE schools as well. We are going to increase transition kinder by another 2. You recall this year we added an additional 2 classrooms, filled it up, and we're looking to add an additional 2 classes for next year. It's great if we get our kids at 3 because they'll stay through the system. At least that is our hope. So I'm looking to increase our preschool slots. And the last one, we are just exploring this. I can't say that this is something we are going to do, but we are exploring the cost of early morning drop-off. I recognize as a parent when I had kids, I had to be at school by 8 or before. I was supervising schools at that time. And so what was I doing with my child? Either I was leaving him at the gate or I was leaving him with a neighbor, but it was really difficult. How do I get to work by 8 o'clock? And really I needed to get to school earlier. Many of our elementaries are 8:30, 8:45, 9 o'clock. We need to take a look at, and Mr. Herbst is costing it out. What could we do for a drop-off in the morning with not necessarily an academic program connected to that, but an opportunity for parents that do need to be able to drop off their kids? What might that look like? So we're exploring that. So those are the innovative programs. Now, central to the innovative programs, and I recognize this is a long presentation. So we've got about 10 more minutes. So I framed it that it was going to be about 45. So it's great that we are working on our budgets. It's great that we're working on innovative programs, but at the end of the day, we need to work on our academics, especially in the elementary school district, and we have our eye on the prize on that. I speak to it, and I regard it as the academic core. So what are we doing regarding the academic core for this year and also for next year? So what is the academic core? It's the curriculum that we use. It's the instruction that is delivered, and it's the assessment that we use to inform our instruction. And I have 3 slides of the work that we're doing. First, our curriculum adoptions. As Trustee Walker shared earlier, we have piloted in 10 schools, 6 elementary and 4 junior highs, our SWAN pilot. We are looking for a recommendation to move that district-wide after we take a look at some data here moving forward in this next month or 2. We also have a math study committee, and I'm not going to go into that because you have a presentation after my presentation on this, but we're definitely moving forward. This is an exciting one. We are adopting a high school health course but we're currently writing a 21st century success course. I have heard from all different groups last year when I was doing the looking, listening, and learning journey, business, industry, parents, teachers, you all said, how do we ensure that our kids have the skills to be successful once they leave high school, not only in transferring over to college, but also in the workplace. Many of our kids aren't even getting into the workplace because they're not filling out the applications correctly, or they don't know how to write a letter of introduction, or they're not getting off their phones in the middle of the interview, or whatever those soft skills are. Well, we're looking to create a course that kids really need in order to be able to be successful as they move both to college and career. The last is we've really worked on providing curriculum supports for the number of adoptions that we had this year, and that was really to a large degree part of the Point 5 initiative that we had the opportunity to be able to do workshops after school. So that's the curricular side of the instructional core. The next one is instruction, and this is really at the heart and soul of what we do and what students have the opportunity to be able to learn and teachers to be able to learn from as well. One, we've increased our collaboration, as you know, through our collaboration time, and it's been very focused in the collaboration. Are we where we want to be? Absolutely not. Have we grown? We have grown, but there's still a lot more work to do around creating the right conditions for teachers to learn from each other so they can use data and make modifications to their instruction as they move forward as a team. You heard earlier that we had a 3-year professional development plan. This is really absolutely essential to be able to stay focused in instruction and know where we're going in 3 years or 2 years, rather than each year coming up and taking a look at where are we and where do we want to go. And then lastly, building the capacity of our administrators. And I think Mr. Godot outlined that earlier pretty well. And there's a number of bullets identified there. Assessment, that's the last piece of the instructional core. We are working through an assessment committee to take a look at common assessments for next year. Central to the common assessments will be identifying what are the essential standards our kids need to have mastered, what are the lessons that are aligned to that, to ensure that we have those, and then what are the assessments that are going to gauge if we're there or if we're not. My vision for next year is that principals have a data dashboard and teachers have the ability to be able to go in and be able to compare where they were last year and where they are this year and be able to learn from each other on who's being successful and who's not as a way of identifying where it's not working, but more importantly, where it is working, so teachers have the opportunity to knock on the other teachers' door and be able to get information. Math, we started this year with district-wide doing the interim assessments, K6 and 11, with the exception of Swan, because Swan has their own internal assessments. Beyond the goals, I think there's 4 slides left. So we've talked about innovative programs. We've talked about the instructional core, and now this is all the other stuff that's still new. It's not all the work that we're doing. Again, it's just what's new in the system. And I see all of you all exhausted. So this is partly by design, because I want folks to recognize that we have a lot on our plates and we have a lot in the system. And so we need to be very cautious and cognizant of what we are putting into the system. Because again, we don't want a balloon that's going to break, because if it breaks, it's okay if it breaks. It just puts us back 6 months, right? You'll still grow. You just don't grow with the rate that you would like to. So part of the interview process, you all talked about the LCAP and what do we do with the LCAP and how do we align that. This year we are going through the process through the LCAP committee of taking our LCAP and aligning it straight with the goals. So it should be one and the same. So when you pick up the LCAP at the end of this year, it should look very familiar to you. We also have had some bumps and some bruises. We did a district reorganization, and Trustee Walker talked about it was the smoothest he's seen in large organizations. I can say not everyone would say that. There's many principals that would say it was really tough, because what I didn't anticipate was new folks had new offices and new chairs, but they had to learn a new job. And so it takes a little while to learn a new job. I'm going to use Danielle Hinkle, for example. She's a master at what she does, but she was in a new job. So it takes her 6 months to be able to catch up to the learning. So there was a lot of work in the system around that. I do think we are down the downslope on that one. I'm hoping I'm connecting with principals on that. We're going to be coming forward in January 21st, I believe, with 3 additional reorganizations. It's not that we're changing anything that we did last year. It's just continuing to go deeper with realigning our organization. And we already have some out for next year as well. But the ones that we're going to be coming forward with is information and education technology, financial services. You've seen a little bit of that. And then our instructional coach model. Really, the purpose there with our instructional coach model is to get more direct services to our schools. We're going to further develop our professional development department. This is a new department. There's still folks that say, what do they do? We'll continue to do work around our goals and the professional development department. And then lastly, you all saw the 8 facility master plans and the work around that. This is a heavy lift, and many of you know about the work around CTE. We're in the process of a 2-year really redesign, but not only is it being redesigned to be shifted, it's further developing what we already have in the system. So further developing our STEM-related programs at Enox, Johansson, and Grigori that's outlined there. And then we will be coming forward with recommendations in March on which CTE pathways we want to continue and which ones we want to phase out or eliminate. And we will bring that back to you in March. The studies continue. In fact, Mr. Gillespie was here today. He was the same person that did the education services. He's taking a look at our alternative ed programming. We recognize we have a lot of different alternative ed programs, but are they the best that they can be, and where can we shore that up? He will be coming back with a year 1, year 2, year 3. How do we shore up our alternative ed? In addition to English language programs, a transportation study, and a high school transcript study. All of that is in the works. Actually, transcript study was completed. This really takes a deep dive into looking at our English language learners. Do they have access to A through G? Taking a look at our kids completing our CTE pathways. Do we have barriers to A through G? Our A through G is low. I believe that it is lower than where we need it to be. So what are those barriers just within our schedule that is not allowing our kids to be able to move forward with where we would like to see them? We also are in the process of getting our adult school WASC accredited. They were here a month back looking at the first phase of the WASC accreditation, and we've also expanded that connects the Language Institute students. We actually have kids from Language Institute that aged out. They're currently in the system, and we anticipate that they will have diplomas by the end of the year, and we've also expanded out our diploma track. And then lastly, you saw at the last board meeting, we submitted 3 CTIG grants, which is really grants to help with facilities for our nursing program, our agricultural program at Modesto High, and the JROTC. So we hope that we get those as well. Got to be coming to the end here. Automating systems. I think that I just have 2 slides. Automating systems. Our systems, if we can become efficient and effective with our time, we're going to be able to have more support to our schools. One example of that is just Agenda Online. I know some folks have struggled with Agenda Online. Others got right on with it, and it was much easier. What I can say from my perspective, there's been hundreds of hours saved and hundreds of pounds of paper saved. So what does that allow me to do? It allows me to work with you all and work with others, because instead of working on we're working on the process we used to use, going deep with an agenda, I'm able to work with Mr. Sulkin on computers or Brad Godot on principles and what have you. So everything that I'm going to outline here is really about automating our systems. The first one is our dashboard and our data. Raptor, which is excellent for safety and security, that was implemented this year. Online registration, which is going to come in the summer. We talked about that at the last board meeting. Developing a system to track our dual enrollment. We have hundreds of kids doing dual enrollment and not getting credit on our dashboard for it because we just haven't had the system to be able to track that, and we are working to create that system. You heard about the work orders. No, I'm sorry, you heard about the travel. We're also going to be doing work orders. Last year, we looked to apply for some migrant ed grants, but one of the barriers that we had was that we didn't know how many kids that we had in the system because there wasn't anything in our system to be able to track that. We are working within the bounds of the law to be able to track enrollment in our migrant ed, which will help us access grant dollars in the future. And then lastly, being able to track our professional development so we know who's completed the 0.5. But more importantly, 2 weeks ago, I was in a meeting around Probe 1s and Probe 2s. We principals came forward and with different issues or concerns about teachers. We could take a look at who has accessed professional development and who hasn't, for the purpose of if someone is struggling around classroom management, then we can say, why don't you take this class, or this class? So it helps us help others as we look at what has been completed and what has not been completed. And lastly, we really can't do this. I'm not doing this at all by myself. This is a team effort, but not only is it district office and sites and our union partners, but it is our greater community as well. It's really getting folks on board with the vision and the mission of this board, with what you outlined as your foundation from last year. One, we continue to work with our labor partners. I put as a high priority that we keep a positive relationship with all of our partners because they are the folks that ultimately are in front of our kids and are creating the right conditions for our teachers. So that I think we're in a good spot with our labor partners at this point. Cradle and career participation with our county, we definitely took a much more hands-on approach this year and are part of that movement, if you will. Increasing our parent engagement involvement and community outreach through Mady's office and under the leadership of Ms. Noonan, we have increased opportunities for our parents. This year, we're also part of a countywide threat assessment team that Mr. Zerley has been one of the leaders in that, working with sheriff, fire, and the district office, and what do we do for large-scale threat to our school. We also have our support for our refugees through our grant. It has been even more involved than I had anticipated over at Tuolumne. In talking with teachers last week, there's been a lot of direct supports to parents at the early age, which I think is great for our refugee parents and students. Lastly, we're building our recognition programs and developing a very close relationship with our feeder patterns under the leadership of Miss Mack and the articulation that we've had with our feeder schools, and also the relationship that we have with their leadership. So we can help and support our kids as they transition into Modesto City. So it can become a seamless transition. It's not going to be there this year, but hopefully in the next 2 or 3 years, we can develop the seamless transition and a bridge from our feeder schools to our high schools as we move forward. That was a lot, and I am happy to say that I have 1 extra minute. I've been watching the clock, and I do want to say thank you to Cabinet. I can say that I run you hard, and I don't say thank you often. They tease me that I don't give them much recognition, and yet recognition is a big goal of mine. I do appreciate the work that you do. Can you work harder? The answer is yes. But I do appreciate the work that you do, and I'm confident that in 2 years you're going to be able to look back and say, wow, look at this district that we have all created and we've worked to support. And I also want to thank the union partners, because without you all on board with much of this, then we really wouldn't be where we're at. This is only year 2. Wait till year 4. We are not going to have a budget deficit at all because we're going to have folks clamoring in and wanting to get to our schools. So with that, I'm going to open it up to any sort of feedback and questions.
Some questions from the board? Trustee Newman?
Thank you. This is an amazing report, and your written report, I read through all of that too as well. There was a question I had on, I think it was for Mr. Godot, and but it could be directed to the superintendent too. Are we developing professional development specific for our principals? We talk about coaching and building capacity, but are there specific, can they access the PD as well?
Yes, actually in our administrative meetings for both our K-12 principals as well as our K-12 VPs and APs, each of our monthly or bi-monthly meetings includes professional development built into the structure of those meetings now, which is a change, as well as networking time where principals are working in small teams with an issue, a problem of practice that they identified at the beginning of the year. So in some ways that's also, developing their skill set. So yes, we are providing professional development in addition to the different pathways or workshops and programs that I mentioned earlier.
So is that eligible for that 0.05? No.
No, those, the trainings during the K-12 admin meetings, that is during their workday and a part of the normal course of business that we're.
So my question is there training outside time that's specific just to principals that they can access that extra money?
Yes, there is.
Okay, that's good. Great. That was my big question on that. And then my other question was for HR, Mr. Thank you. Good deal, Mike. Okay, so so we've got you had mentioned the certificated automatic evaluation notifications, or can you tell me a little bit more about that?
I went so quick, I didn't mention that specifically, Trustee Newman, but we have done that for classified evaluations. The idea is that
classified, okay.
Yeah, instead of staff having to track, monitor, and handwrite and data enter to get information about when an evaluation is due, it's automated in the system. It goes out monthly to managers who evaluate classified staff saying you have these evaluations upcoming and the deadlines for those. So it's to get us on track and a regular systematic way to ensure that we have timely completion of those. We do expect and plan to extend that to evaluations outside of just classified staff as well.
And the other thing I didn't see on your list, you had a big lift for HR. So I just want to commend you for, this is a lot to do when you came in here. I think this was an area where this district was sorely lacking. In terms of when we were hiring and all of that. I know that was something you put into place too when we were going out and recruiting and making sure we're getting out there to get the best early on. I don't see that on your list, but you've done that this year, right?
Yeah, one of the first charges I had was hit the ground and go start doing more proactive recruiting when I was in the senior director role. So we definitely did expand our efforts as a district in that area. And we do earlier posting of recruitment and scale back a little bit on the elementary front as we tighten things up relative to just taking a real close look at our staffing, but especially on those hard to fill positions, some of the math sciences, administrators, we have postings out right now for next year just to get out early on.
Great. All right. Good to hear.
All right, thanks.
And I think that was it. Thank you, all of you, for Cabinet, for all your work on this, because this was a lot. And thank you, Superintendent. This was really exciting. It is the second most senior member on this board. It's just hard to believe where we've come. And it's just a short amount of time, and the hope that I have for the district to improve and to move forward. And the lives that we impact, the amount of people that we impact in this community is enormous. And so we need this to work. The community needs this to work, and so and work well. And so I'm just excited to see where we are going and moving and pushing this forward. There are things that you mentioned that I've hoped we could get to and get going, and you're moving on them already. So thank you.
Trustee Irvin.
Yes, I would also like to concur with Trustee Newman in terms of the work and the progress we've been able to see in such a relatively short period of time when you look at the task at hand. Also, being on this side of the dice and versus when I was 14 and a half years on the other side, and looking at progress and change and things like that. So I can definitely say that there's been some monumental changes in a relatively short period of time, and all for the good. both on both sides of the dice. My question had to do with technology services as it relates to cyber threats and security and our data. And so what's happening around with all of this going into place, how is that being integrated, and what would the impact be with protecting our data sources?
Well, there's two areas. One is human engineering. So that's part of what we have to do is educate our customers, which is teachers, staff, and admin, about what comes in as a valid email and what to do. So that's something that we'll be doing in the springtime, is kind of sending out little friendly reminders, don't open up if it's not a trusted source. Internally, though, we have been starting an analysis. We actually started a few weeks ago. There's a federal program called E-Rate, and you get federal funds for infrastructure. So part of this year's application cycle will be looking for a new firewall system. So we've been working with some engineers that are outside as well as internal staff to analyze what our needs would be, and we'll put it out an RFP for the board to approve once we get the bids back in probably the February board meeting. And that's going to be kind of in two layers. One layer is the external threat and protection that a firewall gives you. The other one would be the internal for malware, which isn't E-Rate eligible, that will be also part of that RFP and recommendation back to the board. Right now, we currently have a Cisco system, and it has some of those features inlaid into it, as well as we're using Microsoft's antivirus system. But I kind of want to, I guess, look at the Gardner Group's quadrants and look for a system that gets you both user protection as well as infrastructure protection. And the one that we were looking at, which under E-Rate you have to say or equivalent. I can't spearhead one manufacturer, but we are going towards Palo Alto, which is the industry standard. Specifically in K-12, they probably have 70% of the market share.
Thank you. And again, thank you for all your hard work, Superintendent, cabinet, extended cabinet, and then again, our unions. Again, like you said, this wouldn't be possible without collaboration and people with their desire to really work together for the ultimate goal to really serve our teachers and our students and our families, and it takes a collaboration to be able to do that. People working together and willing to set personal differences aside and come together. So I think this is a prime example of that. So again, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Irvin. Trustee West?
I also appreciate the hard work that everyone's done. I think this easily could have been a half-day presentation, so I appreciate the timely manner of it. It seemed like it was fast, but I think we got the gist of everything. And as Trustee Irvin talked about, there's a lot of change that's good. Change is hard. So I appreciate the fact that we're not rushing into this and we're taking our time to make some of these changes. My question is just a really simple one. The STEAM feeder patterns, you just went really quickly. I got the first one, Tuolumne, Hanshaw, and Johansson. What were the other two patterns on those, the feeder patterns? Say it again.
Sam?
Rose, La Loma, and Downey. And then the third is Beard, Roosevelt, and Davis.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you so much.
Okay, next one is Trustee Walker.
I think we all are on the thank you thing. I try to do 2 bullet notes here. I think the Saturday school is interesting because I knew that there was a second one because I got a phone call, and I was going to do everything in my power to try to get it Johansson Saturday morning because we knew it was coming. That midnight arrival home from San Diego got in the way of that. It just wasn't happening, but the notification did go out and we were aware of it, and so that was good to know because that communication was going out. And now I get everything from Johansson as well as Enox because my daughter's at both schools. Interesting enough, we have to sort which one. Distance learning, I think, is encouraging. I've got a card that'll come up in the next agenda item. Distance learning is part of that, and how we put that together, I think it's a crucial element if we're going to leverage how we move forward and take care of all these different sort of avenues. Because as you mentioned, you could have 3 students here, 4 here, 2 there, and 5 there. If they're all not in the same place, then how do you do that class without moving the teacher, which seems highly problematic to me. That's good to hear. all the reading material I took with me to San Diego has me coming back to visit with Mr. Russ when this is over after the holidays, because I have not gotten into my IT bit, but I also understood what you were dealing with as well. As, as dusty as those job descriptions were, they're sort of like the board policy manual I found 5 years ago. I understand. But we'll follow that back up. On the back of that sort of report that we talked about in the very beginning, there's a piece of that that I have not gotten to because I wanted to give enough bandwidth for you all to settle in. And so Appendix 5 talks about data privacy and security. I spent 10, 12 hours sort of working that, and it would be interesting to come back after the holidays if the superintendent's willing and help me put together what would look like that report as to what that looked like then, where we're at now, and sort of where we move forward. Because as Trustee Irvin was talking about cybersecurity, I'm far more concerned about student data security and third-party vendors, which changes the law and a lot of the legal ramifications around how we handle that data. Once it's handed off to a third party, the rules change, or they used to change. And so I'd like to get some clarification on that after we get through the holidays. The only other question I had is more of a question that I guess I would ask you all to ask when you're talking about Tuolumne. When they pull down this 7th Street Bridge, that entire community is going to end up being more or less an island. I think if we're looking out when they pull that bridge down and we start doing that, and they're not part of the city, and so they're sort of sitting out in county. And so when you combine the fact that they're in county and not getting city resources, and then you look at removing an avenue to get back and forth, if there's a way for us to sort of be looking downstream, anticipating how we may or may not be able to provide services there, that may buy us some goodwill, which I think goes a long way to retaining our students. And that would be my question is not an answerable one tonight, but as we look downstream, 6, 8, 9, 12 months. And my questions don't have an answer tonight.
But just so you know, there's also 9th Street Bridge, and they're not taking that away. So,
My understanding was community members talking to me felt like they were stranded.
Okay.
Because they felt like there was a point when there was something going on the 7th Street Bridge they couldn't get out, and there was something else going on there, and they really were in a very difficult spot, and they don't have city services, which means anything that we're doing in the city, there's an impression that they're not necessarily the first thought on people's minds.
okay. Well,
If
thank
that
you.
makes sense.
Okay.
Proactive customer service.
All right. Okay, 2 other board members. I have Trustee Brown.
So I don't have any specific questions, but I do have an observation, and I'll frame my gratitude around that. I appreciate Dr. Noguchi and the cabinet modeling for the entire district with this presentation the effectiveness of collaboration and teamwork. And the fact that you are working together so well in focusing on the goals of the district is commendable. I can see that the work that you're doing is carrying forward and being modeled at the site level with the collaboration and teamwork that's happening between our staffs at the school site. And my hope is, and I believe very much that what's happening at the school site being modeled by the district is taken into the classroom and being modeled with increased, raised expectations and raised accountability for our students because they're seeing that with their leaders. And I believe that that will have a great effect on raising educational standards and academic performance. So I thank you, and I hope that we always focus on what we're doing having a positive effect on the ability of our students to learn and to be as productive as possible. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Trustee Lopez.
Well, how do you follow Mr. Brown? But my question was answered a bit ago. But no, I really want to thank all of you, the staff, Dr. Noguchi, board members. I know board member Walker, not president, when he was president, mentioned that the work that we do up here, you know, the teamwork that we have here is really great. But and it goes above and beyond the 7 of us. It goes the extension, right? That's why you guys are up here with us, because you guys are part of the solution as well. And so I really commend the work that you guys do. You know, it's today is like what for Charlene and I are our second year on here, and the amount of growth, even though we weren't here before, just based on the folks that have, we know that we're experiencing something different. And so I appreciate that, and hoping to in the next 2 years we start to see more of the fruits of that. I know we're seeing them already in morale and just the spirit that we see, but that starts reflecting, and I know it will on children's futures. So thank you.
All right, so I had one question, was, are you, just how are we working with the business community on the CTE? That was one of your slides, and I know that was a great one. So I know you already have them on your key communicators, and is that going to be how you're going to determine the pathways that we want to move forward on?
So it really in two different ways. First, we took a look at the two studies that have come out through the county and through business and industry and what their needs are. And we took a look at what they had identified as the needs. We took a look at what current pathways do we have, how did they line up, which pathways do we have that the business and industry and studies show that we don't need, and then which ones do we need to further develop, and that is all along STEM, computer science, engineering, all of that. So looking at those studies. Also, as part of the CTE task force, we have members from the community on that particular task force as well, being able to give us information around their needs. Something that really comes out very loud and clear, in addition to specific pathways, it's those soft skills. It's the class that we're working to put together. While we can put that class together, the question is, how do we get kids into that class? And I do believe that if we create the class and the conditions that are exciting for kids and are relevant for kids, then we're not going to have a problem in doing that. So it's two different ways that we've added them.
That's good, thank you. Well, and then normally this was the question and answer, but I just want to commend you on this great lift you've been doing for the last year and a half. I can't believe it's only been a year and a half, but it seems like you've done so much. And just to hear about it and how, just to hear it all in this room together at the same time, and to be able to just say, wow. After you finished, I just wanted to say, wow, because that was a lot to share with us tonight. So I appreciate that, and you're moving us forward at a really great pace. I like the fact that you're working with each other and trying to make the balloon not pop, but expand it as far as possible, and ensuring that everybody's on board with you as you move forward. So this was really impressive. I just can't tell you how it makes me say, wow. So thank you. Anyway, if you only knew where we've been, so it's good. You guys, and just the team that's all together, as I look around the room at each person in the back and up here, and just how you all are working together for this district, and how we didn't get sidetracked last year on some other issues that could have sidetracked us. Everybody came on board together, so I just thank the labor unions that they worked with you and coming in as new superintendent. So it's really good to see where we're at. So at that, we had questions and comments up here. So does the public have any comments they would like to make? As you all sit there and just smile. Okay, thank you. Back to the board. This is a report only, so no decision on this, no vote. So we're moving on to item B3, the mass. Oh, yes, I apologize. I got going. So we will take a 10-minute break. We will Do we have two teachers waiting? We do. Yes. You would like to?
Can we just do that?
Do the math study committee, is that what we're doing right now? Yes, they're like, yes. Are you good? Do you want to take just? Okay, all right. So we'll do it quickly, I guess. So the math study committee, B3. And then we'll take a short break. Mr. Rich.
Good evening, President, Board, Cabinet. Tonight, I'm Mike Rich, Senior Director of Curriculum Instruction Professional Development. We're going to review a few things tonight. Some of this will look familiar at the front end. Review kind of the purpose of the Math Study Committee. We're going to provide report on our December 5th meeting, and we're going to hear some feedback from a couple of our teachers here that we have right here. So I have joining me Ms. Heidi Pagani from Bayer High School and Cameron Gwynn from Enox High School, both members of the committee. Heidi's a math teacher, and Cameron teaches resource at Enox. We're going to outline some of our next steps, and then we're going to get some input from you all on math, essential pieces of a math curriculum. So again, purpose of the committee, you've seen this before. In every publication and every meeting, we talk about this, we address this. Our charge was to find out what's not working, what is working, where is something working in districts that look like us, and then to make a recommendation for future math programming. The committee members, again, they're just there for your reference so you know who they are, and you've seen this before. Meetings that we've held, we've added, including the December 5th meeting. We have a meeting this week, and then we'll have some more meetings as we talk about what's going on here. December 5th meeting. So we held a meeting last Thursday. The committee reviewed the key findings from the November 19th meeting. We discussed their observations from the review of different curricula that pertain to course sequencing. And then they also reviewed some data. The committee asked for me to send a survey out to all math teachers in the district at the 9-12 level on what their thoughts were. And so they reviewed all of that data. And from that, they came up with these 3 recommendations, the committee. So recommendation number 1, the committee recommended to move from an integrated course sequence to an algebra, geometry, advanced algebra. Sometimes you'll hear us referred to as AGA course sequence beginning with the coming school year. Recommendation 2, the committee recommended, based on that data, to build a system of supports for teachers as they work with the new curriculum and course sequence to maximize student learning. And recommendation number 3, the committee recommended to find ways to build systems to support struggling students. The solution will identify ways to support learners, including English learners and those receiving special education services, before, during, and after school. This system also needs to support parents. Those are the 3 main recommendations. This is most of those you'd seen before, except probably number 1. I'd like to invite Ms. Heidi Pagani up here and Cameron Gwynn to talk about just briefly about their experience as members of the committee.
Hi. We're here to thank the board on behalf of the Mathematics Curriculum Committee. I've been a math teacher for more than 27 years, and I've served on many committees, and this was the best experience I've ever had. The committee itself was not just math teachers, but also resource teachers, science teachers, administrators from our feeder schools, and gave us an opportunity for broader insight. I want to thank the superintendent for supporting and supplying our facilitator, because she took us through a process that helped us to have really productive discussions, to analyze good data, and to form a really clear goal. So I know we fell a bit behind schedule, so I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity and the leeway to complete the process thoroughly, because it really was good process. And we came in extra time to do that. The school visits that we did and the curriculum review that we did were very insightful. And our group overall came to a united recommendation that we are all pleased with. And I personally am really excited for the coming implementation. So thank you very much. He's waving.
Cameron said his contribution was waving, so we do appreciate him. It was actually very nice to have Cameron. He was one of our special ed representatives on the board. Very helpful, very insightful. Even as we did visits, he was seeing things in classrooms in a different light than I think maybe the math teachers were. It was very helpful to have everybody on the committee. Grateful for all their time and support. We're going to ask here in a second for your input on maybe some feedback on how you'd like us to proceed with specific elements in a math curriculum. I just want to point out again that we have posted all of our minutes and items on the website. We're working on getting this translated into Spanish as well, but you'll find those on the committee meetings link. Trustee or Vice President West said about 10 minutes ago, change is hard and it takes time. And that's really our next steps. We have to, on Thursday or Wednesday this week, we're going to start looking at what we're going to pilot. We're going to start looking at some logistics. We got to nail down some dates. That involves publishers. That involves substitutes. That involves identifying teachers and areas that we're going to pilot. It's going to be messy. It's going to take some time to get that done. We need to develop an FAQ. We met with some counselors today to talk with them about the process. There's lots of things that they're already it works with to get balloting done, to get kids in the right classes. We need to talk to our feeder districts. We need to look about how does that transfer pattern look for them from the 8th grade into the 9th grade school year. And then we need to continue to develop those other items of supports for teachers, parents, students. Lots of work ahead to do. It will take some time, and honestly, we're probably just at the beginning of this whole process. So at this point, if I'm free to take any questions you may have.
All right, that was a tie here. All right, so trustee Newman, then we'll go west, and then we'll go to.
Well, first off, I want to thank Mr. Gwynn and Ms. Pagani for coming tonight. Thank you. I saw you guys patiently waiting, so I'm glad that we could move forward. I'm sorry, Trustee Brown. But my question is for Mr. Rich. It's regarding, okay, so tonight you're looking for, I just want to make sure I understand what you want from us tonight. You want input from us. We're not voting on anything tonight, right?
That is correct.
And when we're going to be voting on it when?
So it would be a normal curriculum adoption process. Right?
Okay,
so we would go through a pilot process. We would go through a public preview. We
Okay,
would come to the
okay.
board for your review after that point.
Okay, so when we, I was initially one of those people, just to give you some feedback on the, that I was in support of the integrated, and I had a unique student experience with my own son, who was in a class with half students that had been in the integrated path and half that had integrated and Common Core path and half that had not, and those students were performing at a higher level. And there were several teachers that came in and reporting the same thing, because my son happened to be in that first group of kids that went through on the Common Core through high school. So I think what I was seeing there is that the curriculum in the Common Core was causing them to dive deeper into the material. So they were able to look at the math in different ways and perspectives. So they were able to perform at a higher level. And I'm seeing the teachers move up. Am I right on that? Am I on the right track, or was it integrated versus traditional tracking? I mean, what can I explain? Because there were several teachers that also reported that same issue. Sure.
They'd like to answer.
That would be great. I saw them coming up, so I'm like, yay, I would like to, because I'm sure you guys talked about this.
Common misconception that is integrated as Common Core and AGA is not. They're both Common Core.
Oh, no, yeah, I know that.
The framework in which the standards are,
Yes.
are just delivered in a different order. So I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, but the student, and that's what I think the difference was half the students that weren't performing at the higher level, that were not, they were a year ahead, so they never had Common Core. That's what my point is. So there was a unique opportunity for 1 year to see those kind of kids in the same classroom.
So what we're looking at currently, the curriculum that we looked at, and this is why we took longer, because we wanted to see what curriculum was out there. The curriculum itself is exactly the same for AGA and integrated.
Same manufacturer?
Same lesson plans, same 5 publishers, and 4 of them, 4 did both, and all 4 that did both, it was exactly the same. The only difference is when certain subjects are taught.
Sequencing is the only difference.
Sequences is the only difference, and we felt, and we discussed, and we looked at data from everyone and personal opinions and etc. That the AGA is the most comfortable for everyone, and also seemed to be better sequencing.
In what you guys saw, did you see any curriculum that had, like, some of the answers in the back of the book?
Absolutely.
That could be available, because that is not available right now.
Correct. And that was one of the big points with the committee, is what resources are available to help, again, students, teachers, parents. That was a big focus for them. The idea that the content is the same as it's because the standards are consistent. Whatever course sequence you use, it is the same standard. So when we have the new curriculum, it will be addressing those standards. And part of the work that we will have to do as a committee is to help teachers identify what are the really essential standards, what are the ones we need to go deep in, what are the ones that are enduring across multiple grade levels versus those standards that maybe aren't as important, that we can find ways to emphasize what we can go deeper in so that we don't necessarily have to go, the old mile wide.
And then the other issue that when we had the conversation initially about integrated versus AGA was the fact that the 11th grade test is integrated. What was the committee discussions on that? The test itself is integrated, right?
The test itself, again, addresses the standards.
Okay.
Right? And so the framework for the mathematics allows either course sequence, and the assessment is addressing the standards, not necessarily what course sequence you're using.
So you wouldn't call it integrated, the test itself? No?
I would
Okay.
call the test addressing the standards.
Okay.
And also the AGA seemed to be a better preparation for SAT and ACT tests.
Oh, good.
Because the AGA curriculum actually goes further than the integrated and adds in conic sections and things like that are not in the integrated.
Great. All right. Well, thank you. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Go your order. I just want to come back when we're
I have
finished to Amy.
Okay, Trustee West.
I'm really happy to see that there's a program to support the parents as well, because I know so many times parents are lost when they try to help their students. I have just a couple of questions. In the past, I know when I worked for the Sylvan District, I had 8th grade students bus to the high schools to take algebra. And I believe we don't do that anymore. Is that correct?
So probably at that time they were bused to take geometry. So oftentimes algebra was offered at the 8th grade level, which is still currently happening.
That's correct. So we still have students that are being bused, 8th graders, to take?
So at Sylvan, for example, they offer a course that we've certified to meet our SM1. I think they have like 240 kids in that right now this school year. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And this is geared for high school students. It sounds like this program.
This is a 9-12 course sequence, correct?
I'm really concerned about catching, I know this isn't your thing, but I see so many students who start to flounder in elementary school at the early grades in math. And by the time they get a little bit older, they've given up. They've told themselves, I can't do math, I'm not good at it, I'm not smart at math. And I really think it's so important to catch those kids early so that we can give them the support so that by the time they get to high school, they haven't already checked out.
You're throwing me softballs here. So we're working with Swan in 10 sites, and that's exactly one of the things that we're addressing is how do we build that mathematical fluency at the early grades so that they can feel success as they get to the more algorithmic type work. So we're definitely addressing that. One of the issues we'll have to address too is we don't actually have all of those kids that feed into our high schools. They don't all feed in from us. So we're gonna have to work with our feeder districts on that as well.
Thank you.
Trustee Urban.
Okay. Now that the cheese has been moved, I want to find out where, the committee recommended based on the data to build a system of supports for teachers as they look with work with the new curriculum and course sequence to maximize student learning. Because I know anytime you go into transition, there sometimes is a gap there.
Absolutely.
And so I would just like to know what would that look like, in a nutshell? What would that look like so we minimize or mitigate, that happening for students?
Yeah, we haven't developed that quite yet. The recommendation is this needs to happen. We did see some great examples of it when we visited other schools. So we're obviously huge focus on professional development, and we don't have all those answers yet.
I just want to make sure that our teachers and our students be able to find that cheese.
Correct. Yeah.
Let's move as quickly as possible.
All right, thank you. Trustee Brown?
Thank you.
Yes, in the past, we've been told that there's some polarization between teacher groups. Some have supported the integration approach and others have supported this AGA approach. And I want to know, what we're learning as a district is the importance of collaboration and working together. How will we break down that polarization to make sure that every teacher is on board? And what kind of feedback are we getting? I'm sure that the members of the committee are talking to teachers at their school sites. You had a unanimous vote of your committee to go this direction. Do they have the support from the teachers at the school?
So the vote wasn't necessarily unanimous, but at the end, we were all agreed that this was the right decision to make. We came to a consensus. And that was based on the data we've seen. That was based on the committee's conversations with their members at their sites. They all had lots of conversations. It was a very open process. We sent out that survey again to get a direct feedback from the teachers. It will, again, require, I think it'll hinge on what Trustee Walker was talking about. How do we support the teachers in this process? And I think that's really where the success will hinge on.
Okay.
Heidi keeps standing
Oh, Heidi, I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't see it.
I don't know. Yeah, I was going to say that it wasn't unanimous, but we've had these discussions and we took that really, really seriously. And we really did work to consensus and make sure that everyone felt heard. And this time, my sense from all of the people I've spoken with and the people on the committee is that everyone felt heard this time as opposed to previous times, and really felt that they got their voice out there. And whether they voted on the opposite side of that, just really felt like they were allowed to vote that way. And they were okay with understanding that might be their personal preference, but for the best for the district as a whole, they were okay with this.
Okay, Trustee Walker?
Okay. I want to circle back before I get to my questions, because Trustee Newman was fishing in a pond I wanted to get involved with, because the way it was being classified, I think I want to correct, or at least ask if I'm correct in my assumption, since I have a teacher here, which I'm very grateful for. Part of what happened, and if I'm not correct, my daughter's in the wrong class. SM1 and SM2 are what are we required for graduation, correct? That's California state standard. So you have an SM1 and an SM2 class that are essentially combining Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and some geometry. And what that is essentially is compression. And so what they've done is they have compressed 3 classes into 2. Is that a fairly easy? Put it this way, you don't have a geometry class now. You don't have an Algebra 1 class. You don't have an Algebra 2 class. The graduation standard is Algebra 2 light with geometry. So essentially you're mixing two sections of algebra and some geometry within 2 courses. That would define as compression within 2 years.
So it's a little bit different than that. So SM 1, 2, and 3 would be it'd be 3 courses, and if you're on the honors level track, the pre-calculus class would have been compressed from 4 classes into 3.
Okay.
In the California graduation rate is 2 courses of math, with one of those being algebra, but our high school graduation rate is, or our high school requirement is 3 courses of math.
That's good, because I want to use all 3. So back to my questions. I want to focus on the new board policy we passed, but first I want to do a number. 944 days ago was when I asked for a board vote on this exact issue. 944 days to get back to this point for the committee to come back with the exact same decision I was doing everything in my power to do. I'm glad we're here. I just don't wish it had not taken 944 days to get here. Board policy talks about learning theory and based on, I like to stay away from compression. And what I mean by that is I'd like to see the committee come back with 3 unique courses. A year of Algebra 1, a year of Advanced Algebra 2, whatever you want to call it, and geometry. So they're 3 full year courses, which I think goes to the point that you were making, that if we do an AGA approach, we're going to pick up more stuff that isn't in the other courses. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, there's several sections in the Algebra 2 course that would be extra.
Correct, because they don't do a lot with logs anymore. That was one of the things that really got picked up on when I went out and looked at the JC, and tried to get my daughter into a pre-calc class before doing SM3, we had not covered logs. And so that's missing, and there's some other things. And so my request is that we go with a year-long, 3 separate courses. Algebra 1, geometry, the advanced algebra. Theoretically, a student could double up algebra 1 and geometry like in the old days, correct?
Probably algebra 2 in geometry would be what you
Some
would double up.
version.
Correct.
Full-length courses. Trustee Newman talked about textbooks. I think that's a require. I think you guys have already made that decision. I really do. I think the teacher support, the ability to have a teacher's manual with answers, for parents to have a book with answers in the back, and there's a focus on numeric fluency. You know, the part that I didn't talk about in the class I was at in San Diego. Emphasis on fluency and arithmetic number manipulation. The standard algorithm isn't foreign, correct? We're not going, I don't want to lose our students, and that's my real concern, is I've seen one student do really well, other students drown. And if we focus on sort of these ideas like SWAN, and so that's my real concern, is that we make sure we get something that is going to support teachers to do this direct first-time instruction based on standard algorithms and working with numbers versus getting lost in quicksand first. We can go to the quicksand later, if that makes sense. If we're doing full-length courses, is that reasonable?
The recommendation is that we do go algebra, geometry, algebra 2, advanced algebra, whatever you want to call it. Yes, that is what the committee has recommended. Yeah.
So we've got a version we can accelerate, because you could double up. We've got full-length courses that will allow us to work with students who are struggling. We got textbooks. We've got practice problems. The only other problem I would be concerned about, because again, we don't know what you're looking at, which is making this difficult, is how much technology we integrate in here until farther down the road. One of the first things my daughter found out when she got to college is the calculator wasn't so useful. Teacher wants you using pencils and graph papers. And so I'd like to at least say that if we're using technology, it's a single textbook or calculator versus a handheld calculator. And we really are focused on paper pencil calculations, and we're not buried into Google searches for answers. That's my concern. I've heard folks, we just look up the answer. Are we working on sort of systematic problem solving? The textbook will support that thought process. I don't want to go have to have somebody go out and rebuild something because we're dependent on technology. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Then let's hope I am going to move from cautiously optimistic to fully optimistic. I stay cautious for 944 days. It makes me nervous. But I do think if we do this, there's a program I've mapped out from another school district that will allow us to build 5 different pathways forward, from basic to average to exceeding and supporting computer science and STEM, and this will do the trick. I'm appreciative, and I await the list to see what we're looking for, because I really do want to look at what we're looking at. It was one of the things that came out of the session I was at in San Diego when they asked what curriculum they picked. And they didn't want to answer. And then the person questioning them kept pushing, so they finally answered. I'll leave the name of the vendor alone. As soon as they answered, they usually had to backtrack and say, yes, we did this, but we found out 6 to 12 months later it was not a good thing. I knew that curriculum, and I could have told them in 30 minutes it was a bad idea because it had a really bad track record. And so I am looking forward to finding out what the short list we're working off of, so I'll sleep easier. And with that, I've got no more questions.
All right, thank you. Trustee Lopez.
I guess then that goes kind of into my question of, I know that we have SWAN in 10 schools, right? Specifically in our 4 middle schools. And we're talking about continuation with our students. Is the SWAN has a high school component?
No, it does not.
I would like to recommend that we look at something that is very in line with the work that SWAN's doing, so that at least if it's a different company, but that the format's similar, so that kids can really continue growing in one specific method as well. So that would be my recommendation.
Can I respond to Trustee Lopez? Only because he mentioned something. I got a light this time, and I'm in order.
All right. Trustee
Is I
Walker.
didn't mention that
Trustee
because I
Walker,
think that
that's
without seeing what's in front of us, one of the notes I took before, and I didn't, and I certainly talked to Superintendent in San Diego about internal assessments. I would love to see something that has something very similar to what Swan has, where we have internal built-in assessments that we can see and that we are mapping below and up relative to what we're doing at K through 6, K through 8. Because if we're not matching, we're in trouble. Because that's critical, because this is part 2. Part 1 is the K through 8 basic elementary math. Part 2 is this AGA. Part 3 is what we build on top of that, which is the higher level math, the CTE math, the program. And so I agree, and it was in my notes, I didn't get there, but I could not agree more that we need to be aligning up on that level so that a teacher has a decent range of looking at something internally that doesn't rely on an SBAC. That we have internal assessments that align up with our curriculum that will allow them to get sort of an instant feedback, whether it's in your class or a high achieving class, if that makes sense.
Well, I admit I'm a little unfamiliar with the SWAN program, and I've heard good things. I would be a little reluctant just to align just to one particular program, especially considering that we have 7 outside feeder districts, especially considering 2 of our high schools, Enoch and Gregoria, are completely fed by non-MCS sites.
I was thinking philosophically. We're aligned philosophically to the idea that they're going to work together.
Also, the curriculums that we looked at, in all of the curriculums that I've ever looked at, these curriculums seem to be put together the best in support in terms of in-depth questions and drill and kill and all of that. And so I feel like they are going to be the segue will work.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. The name, so are we sticking with, when we do the pilot, are you sticking with the same name and then the students won't know they're just taking this new course? Or are we changing the name and then we'll be phasing that in next year, a year after it'll be 2021 and 22?
We will change the name to Geometry Algebra 2, or Advanced Algebra.
Right.
And we will start this with the next school year, with 2021.
Okay, but just at the pilot school or at all the schools?
All the schools.
Oh, okay, awesome. That, I was concerned because I thought it's going to be a whole nother year delay. Okay, great.
Let's not delay the supports that people have been asking for.
Great. Awesome.
It'll take a little bit more work. We're going to have to address some standards, as in those courses, but let's give everybody the resources they need.
That's great. I really appreciate that because I thought, oh man, we're going to pilot it for a year and then it'll be another year. Okay, awesome. Thank you for all your hard work on this too. Is there anyone from the public wishing to comment? All right, thank you very much. And we're pleased with where you're headed with this. So I know, especially one board member up here is really happy with it. I know we all are. So thank you for your hard work to redo the decisions that were made a while ago. All right, with that, we will take a short 10-minute break. We will call it back to order by 9 o'clock.
the year we're in, 2019, 2020. Every month or every board meeting, you'll see in the consent agenda, you'll see revisions to the budget. And so what this represents is a total of the revisions to the budget to this point. And we call that first interim. You'll see another one in second interim in March. So items we're going to be discussing tonight are our assumptions around average daily attendance, revenue assumptions, expenditure assumptions, and our multi-year projection summary and criteria and standards. As President Marks pointed out in her opening, this is one of 2 times throughout the year that we have to certify. We have to self-certify our budget, and then the county office will agree or disagree. You're either positive, you're either qualified, or you're negative. Those are the 3 certifications. And based on our multi-year projection, which says we can meet our financial obligations for not only this year, but 2 years into the future, we are pleased at the end of this, we're going to ask the board to certify a positive certification for our first interim financial report. First thing we look at, and again, since budget adoption, is our changes to our average daily attendance assumption. And so we are, at this point in time, we are increasing our average daily attendance. And this is for last year, 2018-19. And there's 2 reasons behind this. One, we are conservative in our projections, and it's the timing of the report in which we report our attendance to the state. This does not happen until the middle of July. And so when we adopt the budget in June, we don't know our annual attendance figures at that point in time. We conservatively estimate what they're going to be. And so now we know what they are, and then we reflect it in our budget. Even though it's for last year, the revenue comes this year. So this is an increase in revenue for our budget. And again, it's based on prior year information. We didn't know it in June at that point in time. And then for the multi-year projection, we are projecting flat enrollment in the subsequent years of the multi-year projection. Here you see the ADA trend by the district. The high level was in 2016-17, and so you've seen since then we've been in a decline. And then if you look at the line flattening out, that's our projection for the 2 years in the multi-year projection. Hope is not a strategy. If you're wondering why that has not continued down. However, as the superintendent pointed out in her presentation earlier, we have some very aggressive marketing programs, some very aggressive innovative programs, and we're confident that this line will level off and stop the decline that we've seen based on everything you heard earlier in the presentation. So that's why we're confident in that we're going to flatten out. We're not projecting any further decline in the projection years of our multi-year projection. Now we're going to our revenue assumptions. And just looking at this pie chart, 83% of our dollars come from the state of California in the form of the local control funding formula. And then you can see the smaller pieces of our revenue in that pie chart. You know, and this is very important as we look at such a large percent of our dollars coming from the state in the form of local control funding formula. If or when the state ever goes into a recession, that's the biggest piece of the pie. And so that's the piece of pie that's going to be affected by any downturn in the state's economy. And however, I would like to point out that the state, in the event of a recession, the state is in a much better position with a surplus of dollars. And so we're very hopeful in the event of a recession soon, the state is in a better position than they were in the prior years to handle that. Other revenue assumptions that we have around the local control funding formula is really the only increase we have, and especially when we're a declining enrollment district, is the COLA percentage that you see in this chart. For the current year is 3.26%, and then the projection years are 3% and 2.80%. The 2021 year, and this is how quickly assumptions can change, we're awaiting the release of the governor's proposal for next year, and so that 3% may look different. I just want to caution you the next time we bring that to you. That's how quickly things change in these projections. And you can see based on those COLA percentages, you can see the increase to our base funding and our supplemental and concentration grant funds. I just want you to just remember the base increase, the 5, 5.5, and 7 million when we get to another slide later on when we're talking about our pension increase on the expenditure side as well. This is just our calculation for the elementary district. You can see we get funded based on the grade level of the student. There's different amounts based on the grade, and then whether the student is identified as an unduplicated pupil, of which at the elementary district we have 88% of our students are identified as unduplicated pupil percentage. So if you look at the supplemental concentration grant amounts, those are per pupil amounts that we receive on the elementary side, and look at those amounts, and then we compare it to the high school amount that you see here. High school district has a different demographic of our students. It's 66%, and so we only receive $549 of concentration grant money for the high school students versus the 1,400 or so that you saw on the earlier slide for our elementary families. Other revenue assumptions that we have since first interim, these are things we didn't know in June or that happened because we closed the books. And so you'll see federal deferred and prior year revenues. These are dollars we receive from the federal government. We don't spend them. In the prior year, we have to take the revenue out of our books and then re-record that in the next year. This is every first interim. You'll see this adjustment. And it's really us now saying we're going to spend the dollars from the prior year that we didn't spend. We're going to spend them this year. We have some new, if you see established, we have some new programs. We have Title IV 21st CCLC grant. And then we have some California Partnership grant on the state side, ACES Kids Code grant, and a Strong Workforce grant. Expenditure assumptions. Here's the pie for how we allocate our funds, and obviously, as we know, the largest piece or the largest pieces combined are related to salaries and benefits. That would be certificated salaries, classified salaries, and benefits that are attached to those salaries. And here, as I was mentioning earlier, these are increases to our requirement to the cost of pension for our employees. You see STRS, which is certificated employees, and PERS, which is classified employees. For STRS, it's currently 17.1%. In the multi-year projection, it's going to 18.4%, and then we do see a slight decrease, which we haven't seen in a while, to 18.1% on the STRS side. And then PERS, that continues to increase from the current 19.71 to just shy of 25% in the multi-year projection. And those are cumulative increases of $4.3 and $5 million. These dollars come from our base allocation. So before, when I showed you the COLA increase, which is all we're receiving in new dollars at the moment, it almost takes almost all of that and it goes to our new pension obligations based on these higher percentages for our employees. And this just shows you in a graphical form the base funding increase versus the pension reform increase. 18-19 was the year we became fully funded in the local control funding formula. So you can see in that year there was much more funding based on the percentage increase to pension reform, and then it is more even in the out years. Other expenditure assumptions we have, again, we did not know these items in June. We now know our first month enrollment. We have staffing associated with that enrollment and site allocation adjustments. Posting of prior year carryover and deferred revenue into the current year. So again, with our carryover dollars, if we didn't spend it last year, if our sites didn't spend them, they're allowed to carry those dollars over into the current year. They come from our ending fund balance because we didn't spend them the prior year, and so we add expenses this year. One-time, and those are one-time approved expenditures, but we do remove those from the subsequent years of the multi-year projections. So if there's any one-time expenditures that we have, and we have about $12 million worth of one-time expenditures in our current budget, we remove those in the prior year projections. And then no increases are reflected in this particular budget for pending negotiations. A multi-year projection summary. This is required at our interim certifications. And again, it has to show we can meet our financial obligations. And these are assumptions we use. Step and column costs increase year over year. Pension increases, as you saw. We removed the one-time expenditures, and we remove any deferred and carryover funds. How we budget them as if we're going to spend them all, and so they're removed in the prior year until we close the books and determine again what we didn't spend. This is a multi-year projection summary. You do have the 18-19 year, which you will see the audit report on at the next meeting in January, and you can see the fund balance that we have and how it's going down in each year in the current year and also the multi-year projection. However, it is based on a series of assumptions, and sometimes those assumptions are correct and sometimes they're not. So you can see in 17-18, where we were 18-19, the fund balance actually went up to the current level of $82.6 million. And then again, we have a projection of that decreasing in the current year and in the 2 years of the multi-year projection. Items not included in the multi-year projection nor in the current budget is future impacts from collective bargaining or any potential increases in our special education contribution. So we do have, as part of this document, we have to respond to a set of criteria and standards. And when we look at the standards and criteria, or the criteria and standards, these will help alert us, or you as a school board, to any financial anomalies. And some may be arbitrary, but others are not. So these are things you want to take a look at as a board member as to why are the reasons that we're doing this. Friday I was at a half-day conference, and I heard a speaker from the Fiscal Crisis Management and Assistance team talk about this particular issue and how there's 11 districts that have gone into or asked the state of California for a loan because they ran out of cash. They did not pay attention. You don't just run out of cash in a month or 6 months or even a year. They did not pay attention to these financial indicators. Somebody missed those. That's what these are for, to help identify any potential anomalies in our budget. And so you can see the criterion listed and the response that we've given. And the county office will take a look at this and say that's reasonable or it's not reasonable. And then here's the others that we have as well. So next steps, again, as I talked about early on, based on our current assumptions, based on the factors that's presented and noted in the first interim budget, we are pleased to provide a positive certification and ask the board to approve a positive certification of our first interim budget.
Okay, we're ready for questions. I have Trustee Newman.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Zierli, for this report, and thank you, Michelle, and your team for just help the budget. It's always a great report. So I have a question on the slide presentation, or criterion 5, comparison of district salaries and benefits ratio to the standard. Can you explain that? And then can you tell me what page it's on in my giant report? Because I usually go through that as well, and I just want to make sure I'm looking at the same thing, what it means.
Sure. Let me find the page real quick. So the criterion standards review begins on page. Let's see here, and it's in the thick document,
Yeah.
and it begins on page.
It's more of a story.
Is it in the MYP?
No,
Okay.
it's behind the MYP.
Okay.
I'll get it for you in a minute. It begins on page.
Oh, here's the criterion stuff. Okay. Here's
It's
a
actually page 1 of 26. And so you go through there and you'll see the numbers listed on it. So there's criterion standards 1, 1A, and then we get to standard 5, which is salaries and benefits. It's on page 5 of 26.
5 of 26. Okay. All right. Oh, here
So the
it is.
standard in this particular review was that projected ratio of unrestricted salary and benefit costs to total unrestricted expenditures has changed by more than the standard in any of the current year or 2 subsequent fiscal year. Our explanation is the projected salary and benefit costs reflect the assumption of step and column increases and increases to pension costs, resulting in the unmet status in the first and second subsequent year. So it's not for our budget year, it's for our projection years out.
Okay. Okay. So the issue is that 84.6 is over the 81.9. It's over our normal ratio.
It's actually 85, yeah, 85.6 and
Well,
85.7.
Yeah, at the bottom.
Okay. Oh, okay. I'm on the top.
And it's based on, the way this works, it's based on a historical average. So if you look at our historical average,
Yeah.
16, 17, 17, 18, and 18, 19, our historical average is 81.9%.
Right. So it's the deviation between 81.9% and the 86. Okay, and 85. Okay. And so we're saying that it's a bigger percentage, the salaries and benefits are becoming a bigger percentage of our budget
Correct.
during those 2 years out.
During our projection years.
And
Because of projected step and column costs and the increase in pension that we talked about, the increase in.
And not including any adjustments made in negotiations, because this doesn't include any adjustments for negotiations.
Correct. We have not built in any assumptions for pending salary settlements.
Okay, yeah. All right, thank you.
Okay, Trustee Rocker.
We roll back 2 slides. It's the one more, that one. And so we get this big spike up here in 1819 that came up above. A lot of that's attributable to the fact that they went and fully funded the LCFF, right? That would have been spread out over 2 years and they just gave it to us all at once.
That was, yes, but there was also a factor of we didn't spend to the level we had projected we were going to spend. So it was a combination of those things, yes.
But they did push forward.
They pushed forward to fully fund, as you
Yes.
saw in that other
Correct.
slide, to fully fund before.
Governor Brown left for vacation.
Yes, correct. That is correct.
And so on to the math trivia or the budget trivia, the question I thought was interesting. I noticed in looking backwards, and this goes rear view mirror looking, but we're looking forward at the same time. Looking at the audit report, I saw very little change in special ed, only on the Fed side. There was very little change on the Fed spending on special ed between last year and this year. That seems to be holding steady, I would assume, as it didn't deviate. What I did notice is that Title I spending last year decreased by over $2 million, which put us down to 10 in total Title I funding, which is a reduction. Do we expect that trend to continue, or do we not know because we're waiting on feds to figure out how much they're going to give us in Title I?
Well, the federal fiscal year is different than our fiscal year.
I just saw a downward trend there that caught me by surprise.
It is a downward trend, and I mean, we are projecting a downward trend as well. So to
We
what
expect
level?
that to hold.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and then the trivia part of this is the good news is that the money we got from the Department of Agriculture to feed children went up $5 million. And so now we're sitting at Title I at $10 million. Food to feed children is now at $15 million. And now there's a larger gap, which is always my favorite trivia when it comes to the budget, that the feds give us more money to feed children than educate children. And that gap seems to be widening now, which I caught sort of surprising. I was glad we got the extra money to feed, but I was caught off guard by the decrease in Title I funding that I didn't expect.
Correct.
We'll expect that trend to hold.
We would expect that trend to hold until the federal government decides to change their funding for education.
Well, at least they're giving us food. It's funny that trivia question keeps getting wider and wider because now it's essentially a third higher. You're getting 10 for education and 15 to feed. And then the special ed is holding steady. It's only 10% of the pie, but it's an interesting fact.
Right. Correct.
Thank you for the time. Thank you for the report. That ends my questions.
Okay. So I had a question on the first interim general fund page. It's page 1.
Okay.
And it's restricted resources, 29, yeah, anyway, the numbers are 2,000 to 9,999. But anyway, it's revenue expenditures and changes in fund balance. So it had a question on, it had a capital outlay of, and it was a minus 720%. So I was trying to understand how these percentages work and why the capital outlay ended up being so high. And I was wondering if it had to do with our bond. Were we spending money? Because it starts with, anyway.
What page are you on, please?
It's on
if I don't
page,
mind?
okay, so it's page 1. And I don't know what page it is on the internet, but it's page 1. And it's only about, I don't know, 6 or 8 pages in to the report. And it's the general fund restricted. It's the general fund restricted page.
Okay.
It's only like half of the page it has,
Oh, you're on the restricted resources.
yes.
Okay.
So it was in the expenditures line.
Okay. Got it.
Okay, and then it was number 6 in that line, the capital outlay. And you go across, and all the way on the last column, it was 720% negative.
Right.
And so
So-
I just wanted to understand how it works. I mean, a couple other ones were minus 50% and minus 54%.
But
But
what that variance represents is if you column D, which
Right.
says projected year totals, that is our current budget. That's what we're asking you to approve. That's our current budget amount.
Right.
And so what it's doing is it's comparing that to column B, which is the last time the board approved a budget, which would have been in this case estimated actuals. And so the difference is we've added. It's a negative, but that means we've added. We've added a budget here for $1 million for capital outlay that we didn't have. This is going back to one of the earlier slides when I said at first interim we have one-time dollars that now we're adding in here. What this is specifically, it's a one-time adjustment for capital outlay. Michelle may know what it is. I'm not sure off the top of my head. Okay.
please come to the microphone so they can hear you at home if they're still awake and watching.
The adjustment is actually carryover of CTE incentive grant funds.
Oh.
So it was funds that weren't spent last year, and they are for a project.
Okay, because I was trying to figure out where the money came from. Was it from our bond that we're going to use it for anyway? So I was just trying
No,
to.
it's carryover dollars from the CTE incentive grant.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
That was helpful.
So that's an example of what we were talking about earlier, what I was talking about earlier, where things we did not know the carryover back in June. We hadn't closed the books yet, so we now know it. Now that ended up in our fund balance. Our fund balance grew, and so now we're rebudgeting that, and then that's why. And that's a good catch. I mean, that's something as a board member I would watch for a 720% variance. Okay, what are you guys doing to us? So I mean, that's a good question, and then there's a reasonable explanation because it is carryover that wasn't spent last year that we're planning to spend this year.
Okay. Thank you. That was my only question. So are there no other questions from the board? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, back to the board. This needs a vote, so it's approval. So is there a motion to approve the budget? Trustee Newman, second by Vice President West. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. All right, this wasn't on my agenda, but usually there's items for future agenda items. For the last item, are there any items for the future agenda items? Mr. Trustee
I'll bring
Walker?
it back in January. I'd rather work with the superintendent to put
Okay.
it together, and then she can connect me with Russ, as I mentioned earlier. I'd rather give him some leeway, but January, February, I'd like to put something together to bring back on technology, data privacy, blah, blah, blah. But I'd rather work with them as a team versus drafting it on my own.
Yes. All right, well, thank you very much for a great meeting. I appreciate all of you and all your smiles. Sorry to keep you so late, but may I have a motion to adjourn? Trustee Newman, Trustee Walker. All those in favor? I guess. Good night.